Kia ora koutou. Welcome back to our session 8 of our long-term plan submissions. Apologies for the slightly late start to this session. The meeting is being recorded and will be live streamed on the Council's YouTube channel. If we can just quickly go over the health and safety requirements for the Council chamber. The exit is on either side. Just follow the governance staff, and we would need to evacuate to the assembly area in the clock tower in case of an emergency. No smoking in the building, and there's a defibrillator located downstairs on the ground floor. All online participants are to keep their cameras turned on, please. We'll just move to the apologies, if there are any. Apologies from Councillors Meehan and McAllard. I'll move that. Seconded by Councillor Barrett. Can we vote on that? So just to explain to submitters, you'll have 10 minutes each today, and I would encourage you to allow some time as a part of that 10 minutes for councillors to answer questions. There will be the time on the screen, and it'll go to orange with 30 seconds to go. We do need to keep to time today just because we are running a bit late. So first up, we've got submission 848, Hugh O'Connell. Thanks, Hugh. Over to you.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Madam Chair and councillors. Firstly, an apology from Natalie McLean, the co-chair of the Disabilities Reference Group, who is out of town on business. I've filed some written submissions. I propose just to go through those or touch on some of the main points. So the purpose of the Disability Reference Group is to ensure the needs of disabled people are appropriately taken into account in the context of Council's roles and priorities. According to the 2013 New Zealand Disability Study, an estimated 24%, or about a quarter of people living in New Zealand, were identified as disabled. The Disabilities Reference Group has listened to several helpful presentations on the consultation document, and we've had regard to the challenges and opportunities facing the city over the next decade. These submissions are not directed towards any particular infrastructure-related obligations and options set out in that document. Rather, we are submitting that Council should preserve the existing operational budgets, including the maintenance and renewal budgets, relevant to the 3 programs or initiatives of particular interest to our reference group. And those are the accessibility assessments, the accessibility charter, and city centre transformation. I've just noted in some of the media articles, some local bodies refer to groups calling for, in light of quite extensive or high proposed rate increases, to reduce services, and even are suggesting redundancies as a way of counting the effects of the rate increases. As far as we're concerned, in addition to operate effectively, we're reliant on council staff for guidance, liaison with Palmerston North City Council, information gathering, and general administrative support. This also includes staff who furnish council with reports that are relevant to what we are doing, and also those involved in the complex task of overseeing the barrier-free audits, implementation, and the technicians who ultimately end up carrying that out. The next item of interest to us is the accessibility assessment. As you will recall, on the 20th of March, the Group Manager, Property and Resource Recovery, presented a memorandum entitled Accessibility Review, Council-Owned Buildings to the Community Committee. The committee unanimously resolved to receive that memorandum and to receive an annual update report on the accessibility implementation program. Our group did not file submissions in relation to that item. However, we can say that in our view, the Group Manager's review is a fair summary of an extensive and detailed set of reports auditing nearly all council-owned buildings, and we support the implementation approach outlined in that Group Manager's memorandum. We suspect also that such a comprehensive audit by a specialist entity of local body infrastructure may not have been carried out elsewhere in New Zealand and may serve as something of a groundbreaking exercise for local bodies in general, particularly if the recommendations can be implemented. Referring on to paragraph 6 of the submissions, that review is part of a broader infrastructure work that will commence in 2025. That part will deal with the wider infrastructure, which essentially includes roads, footpaths, crossings and parks. And as we understand it, there's about half of the $200,000 that was allocated to that review process is still available to complete that side of it. I've noted that the review states that while there's a lengthy list of work to be done, and most are simple fixes that can be addressed as part of business as usual maintenance renewals, there are some suggested changes that are considerably more complex and will need to be considered alongside program renovation work, seismic upgrading and major structural or surrounding upgrades. So without forgetting those aspects, it looks like a large part of the work can be done within about 5 years. So we support a continuation, and this is not to suggest that these operational budgets are under threat, but a continuation of those in the 2024-34 long-term plan. Based on paragraphs 5 and 6 of the review, this should be sufficient to capture those simple fix matters and works that include adaptations and improvements often associated with minor structural alteration, which will be added to the scope of the existing renewals programs. We also submit that the accessibility audits and work outlined in the review will contribute to Council's Goal 3 outcomes that are listed at page 9 of the consultation document. I've referred to those. I note that this council was receptive to the original request for an accessibility audit in 2020. Then in June 2020 to doubling the original funding in order to complete the audit, which is still yet to happen. And most recently to the reception of the Group Manager's review of 20 March 2024. Group would like to acknowledge the Council's support for this initiative and are confident that Council will stay the course until Council infrastructure substantially or even completely conforms to the recommendations in the infrastructure audits. The third matter is the City Centre transformation, and just to briefly touch on that, we're looking forward to stage 3 of the Square East upgrade occurring. I understand that was deferred in the 2022-23 financial year. This is a relatively short section of the square, and that would finish off the eastern side of the upgrade. The accessibility charter, there was a report sought on the 22nd of November after a submission to the Community Committee, and the Chief Executive is to report back on actions and resources that would be required for Council to sign up to the charter. So we look forward to this report and subsequent dialogue with council staff. Lastly, I'll just touch on a couple of things. Enabling good lives is something that has been part of our work for some time, and in 2020 council resolved to adopt enabling good lives principles and seeking and integrating them into the way council does its work. And we are heartened by the references in the documents to enabling good lives, and I've referred to those from about in paragraph 13 and paragraph 19 of my submissions. Lastly, well, to add on to that, accommodation has been a feature of what we have been looking at, and mentioned in my submissions that 47% of disabled people within the age group 16 and 60 live in rented homes, compared with 35% of non-disabled people. So disproportionately, and I'm not saying that the rates increases are not justified, we're just saying that those are likely to have an effect on rents, and those are going to disproportionately impact on disabled people compared to non-disabled people. So I'll just make that submission. I think I'm running out of time already, and I'll leave it in that. And if there are any questions from councillors on the written or oral submissions.
Thank you, Hugh. Yes, there is a couple of questions. Councillor Barrett.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Hugh. Just wanted to touch on Featherston Street. I assume that the Disability Reference Group is aware of the Featherston Street project in terms of the changes to the transport network there. It'd be helpful to understand what input the reference group was able to have during the design process around that.
In terms of the co-design workshops, we were involved in that, and I see some of the features that have been integrated into that, including the bus stops that extend out into or past the cycle lane.
Yeah.
That looks like a promising feature.
So in terms of the current implementation of that, does the Disability Reference Group have a view around it, or is there insight that you can share with us from kind of networks within the disability community?
Not particularly. I personally haven't talked about anybody that's used who have used those bus stops. Disabled people drive cars as well, and so they're impacted on the constraints that are involved in that current arrangement as well. So, but Disability Reference Group don't have any submissions in particular to make in regard to that.
Great, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Hugh. That concludes your time. Thanks for your submission on behalf of the Disability Reference Group. We'll be considering that on the 29th and 30th of May. So we're going to move now to the last submitter, submission 1119. That's the submission online, and that's Tom Kelvin from the Somerset Group Holdings Limited. Over to you, Tom. Thank you.
Thanks very much, and apologies I cannot be there in person today. Kia ora and good evening, good afternoon, councillors, and thank you for the opportunity to speak to Somerset's submission on the proposed Palmerston North City Council long-term plan and draft development contributions policy. For brevity, I'll call it the LTP and DC's policy from here. By way of introduction, I'm Tom Kelvin and I'm a Senior Development Manager for Somerset. And in my role, I manage Somerset new developments from before we acquire land, so acquisitions, through to the start of construction on site and everything in between. This includes our recently consented village in Kelvin Grove. I appreciate there have been many submissions on the LTP and DC's policy, and you have other submitters to hear from today. So I'll keep my presentation brief, and I'll presume you've read our submission, which speaks in more detail to what we're seeking. Firstly, I'd just like to introduce Somerset and explain what we do. So Somerset is New Zealand's second largest developer and operator of retirement villages, which makes it one of New Zealand's largest home builders. In fact, in March 2023, we were ranked second largest residential builder by value behind Fletcher's. Today, Somerset has 38 villages completed or in development across New Zealand and provides a range of living options for more than 8,000 residents. Somerset has a proven track record over 30 years in building and operating high-quality comprehensive care retirement villages. I'd just like to draw your attention to the distinction between comprehensive care retirement villages and lifestyle villages, as it is relevant to the context of levy and development contributions. Somerset builds new comprehensive care retirement villages, which means a continuum of care is provided on-site, as opposed to lifestyle villages, which may have minimal or no care provided on-site. Given that care component, comprehensive care retirement villages attract a much older cohort. New Zealand's facing a housing crisis, including a retirement living and aged care crisis. Palmerston North and the Manawatu is not immune from that, with an increasing proportion of the district's population expected to be over 65 years of age in the next 10 years. The population and demographic change will result in even further demand for retirement villages and aged care. It is vital that the regulatory environment recognise and provide for the development that is required to meet this growing demand, and that funding for infrastructure is done so on a fair, equitable and proportionate basis. Turning to the DC's policy now, for comprehensive care retirement villages like Somerset's, the per unit occupancy is reduced when compared to a typical household unit. Where the DC's policy assumes 2.6 people per household, Somerset's average occupancy, however, for its independent units is 1.3 residents per unit, and for its care units, our occupancy is 1 resident per unit. In addition to recognising the unique population discount for comprehensive care villages, the development contributions policy should also recognise a further reduction due to the unique low pattern of demand as a function of the elderly demographic occupying a village. An example of that is the reduced demand on community infrastructure, amenities and facilities when compared against the demand assumptions for a typical household unit. Residents entering Somerset's villages average 81 years, have specific physical and social needs, and access Somerset's extensive range of on-site amenities. To fairly account for that lower demand profile, both a population per unit discount to account for lower occupancy and a demand factor discount to account for the older demographic and on-site amenities should be applied for contribution calculations for comprehensive care retirement villages. In our submission, we draw your attention to the recent Tauranga City Council Development Contributions Policy. Through years of our industry submitting on their proposed development contribution policies, Council finally acknowledged that it needed to undertake its own independent review and assessment of the unique demand factors of retirement villages to inform its DC's policy. That review was completed in 2023, and Tauranga City Council have now proposed to adopt the discount factors noted in that report in their latest DC's policy. A copy of their independent assessment was appended for our submission. We consider Tauranga City Council has proposed a fair, equitable and proportionate development contribution through the proposed discount factors based on expected demand from its independent study. We therefore seek that Council adopt the demand factor discount rates proposed by Tauranga City Council as outlined in our submission. Thank you for the opportunity to speak, and I welcome any questions.
Thank you, Tom. Yes, there is a question. Just going to Councillor Zabellin.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your submission. I'm interested in your views on our proposal to introduce the interest portion of enabling works, which this portion is currently rates funded and not recovered through DC charges. Do you have a view on that?
Not at the moment, sorry.
Okay, thank you.
Now we have a question from Councillor Wood. Sorry.
Thank you, Tom. Thank you for coming in and submitting to us. Just wanted to ask a question that your submission didn't touch on regarding our review of our rating system, looking at whether or not we have a land value, a capital value, or a hybrid value rating system. Given Somerset operates villages across the country and across multiple different systems, was just wondering if you had any insight you could share with us into what your preference would be.
I haven't considered that. It's a different department that deal with development contributions, which is sort of more my realm, as opposed to our rates, which sit with our property team. So I'm probably not qualified to, or would steer you down the wrong path on that. But happy to take that offline and give you some insight if that would help.
Understood. Thank you.
And a question from the Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thanks, Tom. Look, I note that you place quite a bit of emphasis on Tauranga City Council's policy. Is it comparing apples with apples? They've got 26 villages, we have 6. They're a big sector up there. I know they've lobbied the commissioners hard. Are we comparing apples with apples?
Yeah, I think we are. When we're talking about the villages that we implement in a place such as Kelvin Grove, it's a very similar village to what we've got up in Papamoa. Whilst there might be more villages up there, the actual villages itself operate independently and quite similarly. And that what we're really honing in on is the number of people that occupy those dwellings is very uniform across our country's portfolio. And so that's what we're really saying, is that our residents, there's less people in those units, so that needs to be recognised, and also the actual demand that that they place on city infrastructure is the same. And I think it's fair to say that it is comparing apples with apples. But look, we've noted to other councils we're submitting on this nationwide, and we're happy to contribute to an independent assessment undertaken by council, which I think we would find the same thing. But look, happy to talk offline about that if that would help.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Tom. There's no more questions. Thank you for your submission, and that will be considered on the 29th and 30th of May.
Thanks very much all. Cheers.
Thank you. Now just want to invite Robert Cuff, submission 1124. If you just push the button, lovely, over to you.
Right, good afternoon, councillors. My name's Rob Cuff, ex-council employee for 19 years and now a retiree. Reading through, I've put in my submission, which you may or may not have read, and being a retiree with fellow colleagues who are also retirees, we are obviously very concerned about the rate increases, and also which will be like a compounding interest over the next few years, and also the $1,000 levy that is being proposed regarding the wastewater treatment plant request. So what I'd like to do is just go over a bit of history that some of the councillors will be aware of, and I'm sure a lot of them won't be, regarding the Nature Calls request for the new consent from Horizons. Now, when the original consent expired and council applied for the new consent, it came back with a list of we know what they were like. There was a hell of a list, and that list was actually read by our Three Waters engineer at the time, who was highly regarded throughout New Zealand as a Three Waters engineer. And his response was to the councillors at the time, the elected members of the time, was to contest it. And so they were asked that his advice was contest it in law, in the courts, but that was not taken up by the councillors at the time. They ignored that. I believe the reason being the cost was going to be somewhere around about $100,000. Which we look at the costs that we're facing today would be chicken feed. So what I'm suggesting is that that the council goes back and does contest this thing on the grounds that, unbeknown to us at this stage, there's been no scientific evidence ever produced by Horizons backing up their claims of what is happening to the river with the discharge of the sewage treatment into the river. So I would suggest that council goes back and has a hard look at that and see what they can do as far as taking them to court and contesting it. The other thing, question that arises under the same scenario is what happens in 2028 if the consent hasn't been granted? I believe, from what I've heard, that the council will be up for an annual fine. Well, perhaps the annual fine would be better be paid by the council rather than the huge amount that we're looking at the present point in time. It might be a more financially prudent way to go. But at the end of the day, are we going to be able to meet that 2028 deadline? And I would suggest, from what I'm reading and the work that's been done so far, we will be struggling. So that's something for the council that we would like to see looked at and see whether that is a possibility, whether going forward we can actually contest it, because I don't believe that has been done up until this point in time. The other matter I'd like to talk to is I've read a lot of correspondence that's been put out by the long-term plan, etc., and a lot of good work has been done by a number of councillors to try and cut the budgets, especially on a lot of the project work. But I have not ever seen or read where anybody has actually looked at cutting costs, the operational costs within the council. Now, I know for a fact over recent years the council is spending hundreds of thousands of dollars on consultants. The reason for that being that a large number of the qualified and very experienced engineers that we did have on council are no longer with us. They've either been made redundant or left. And so the council has been forced to use consultants in a lot of these areas. Now, one way of cutting costs would be to get rid of consultants, but we would need to be employing the engineers to replace them. To go back a step, like at how it used to be, and we used to have that experience and everything in-house instead of paying exorbitant costs to the consultants. So that is another thing to look at as far as cutting costs, because I have seen nothing about cutting costs internally. It's all been about projects up until this point in time. The only other thing I'd like to broach on is, excuse me for a second, yeah, the cycleways, which is quite a topic at the moment with Featherston Street going on. Cycleways and all these other projects, it's all very well putting them in place, whether it be good, bad or otherwise, but I have seen nothing in budgets for the ongoing full of life maintenance of these projects and of these new bits and pieces around the city that are proposed. Now, they're going to be an ongoing maintenance issue, and that will be directly have a bearing on the rates. And so, has the council actually factored in any of these maintenance costs going forward for any of these projects that may or may not be built or go ahead? So I'm open for questions, but that's me for it. Thanks very much for your time.
Thank you, Robert. Just firstly, a question from me. You've mentioned the lack of anything in the plan in terms of reducing operational costs, and you've given the two examples in your submission about the communications and the use of consultants. Do you have any other suggestions around where we could be looking to reduce operational costs apart from those two examples?
Well, those were the two that immediately sprung to mind, but there's been other projects that have over recent years that have been, in my view, and a number of people's views, a complete and utter waste of money. One prime example was a cycleway that was built on Pioneer Highway from Lyndhurst Street or West Street right down through to Maxwell's Line on the eastern side. What was the point of building that when we had a perfectly good on the western side of Pioneer Highway, a shared pathway, which was very, very, very well used, but the cycleway is hardly ever used. So that was just a prime example of of areas where not enough thought is going into what we're spending our money on. That was a waste of money, that cycleway, because it's never used. People are using the shared pathway.
Okay, thank you. We've got a question from Councillor Dennison.
Thank you, Rob. Thank you for bringing back the issue of the past around, which I've actually just pulled up, September 2011 for Walker's report. So your position saying that we should currently push back on the whole wastewater project as the advice was back then and just get back to the drawing board and get back into a realistic situation again.
I agree. Yep, that's my thoughts.
Yep. Thank you, that was clear. So it's just wanting to dive a little deeper. So what was, can you recall what prompted the whole search into a better option review on the wastewater process back then?
Well, basically, the engineer, the Three Waters engineer at the time, when he looked at it, as I've already mentioned, there was no scientific backup for what they were claiming was happening to the river ecology. And so he said that's what should be contested, because it was because of those claims, what was happening to the river, that has blown out the resource consent. So now we're looking at huge amounts of money to spray farmland, good farmland with wastewater, etc., etc. I'm sure there are better options out there now. The wastewater can be treated to just about a point where it's drinkable, and there'd be no reason why that could not be pumped straight into the river, like it always has been over the last many decades for Palmerston North City.
Thank you, Rob. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. And question from the Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just on the same subject, Rob, and thanks for taking the time to put together your submission. I've only been here a decade, so some of the commentary you're probably a bit before me. But I understood there was some science around the degrading health of the river, and that's why we ended up in court.
Is there a question,
No.
Mr. Mayor?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, there's no science that I'm aware of that was ever produced by Horizons. If there was, surely it should have been notified and hopefully peer-reviewed to ascertain what they were saying or claiming was correct. But to my knowledge, there was never ever any science ever produced with their report.
Okay. Yeah, and the 100,000 that you spoke about, I understood we spent over $1 million defending some of the so-called...
I'm not too sure on that. I know there was the figure of the 100,000 was bandied around as far as legal costs were concerned if we did go to court. I'm not too sure what's been spent. I know I've read just recently we've spent $9 million on the Three Waters system up until now. So I think another $100,000 would be small change compared to what's already been spent.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Robert. That concludes your time, and your submission will be considered on the 29th and 30th of May.
Thank you.
Thank you. And I'd just like to invite Jackie Wheeler, submission 1177.
Abatement notice, and then here it's saying. Cancel the notice once Palmerston North agreed to a joint program.
Welcome,
to
Jackie.
investigate the
Just-
cause of the accelerated-
Yeah, press the right-hand button. Over to you now.
Thank you. I have to say I enjoyed listening to Mr Cuff. That was, I agree with a lot of what he said. That was great. So I have 3 points to talk about today. The first being rates. If you've read my submission, you see that I pay a huge amount of rates for my property. So yes, a quarter of my income goes on rates. I'm not looking for, I've agreed, so I specified I prefer the capital value rather than the hybrid. Mainly because it brings my rates down a bit to a almost sustainable level, but not quite. The hybrid will be my second choice, and I run in horror of another land value because that is pretty heavy when I put my numbers into the search engine on the PNCC page. I'm in a situation where the rates are zooming up, and if rates increase 106% over the next 10 years, that means I'll be paying well over $20,000 a year in rates, which, you know, by that stage I'll be a retiree, and that isn't sustainable at all. A way of looking at that is I'll be rated out of my property, which isn't a pleasant thing for anyone to think about. I'm saying this not just on behalf of myself, but on behalf of everybody. A lot of other people I've talked to in exactly the same position, whether they've been ratepayers, taxpayers, productive members of society all their life, and suddenly they've been rated out of their properties. I spoke to someone yesterday who's actually looking at selling her house now because she can see what's happening. And I think it's really sad that our society doesn't support people and instead hikes the rates up for so many people. Yes. So that means that I become very conscious of where my rate dollar is going. I don't like the idea of money being wasted. I'm heavy into not wasting money. And I'm looking at the expenditures of council for the wish list of things coming up. And I consider that our rate money should be spent on essentials, not wish lists, things that we need, similar to what Mr. Cuff was saying. I don't consider the Anzac Park Marae Visitor Centre to be essential. I understand half of that has been paid for by Rangatane, but we're still spending money that we don't have. Can the Awapuni Library be refurbished rather than rebuilt? And that's another option. That's something else to think about. Earthquake strengthening, I understand the government standards, but also the government has added another 4 years to that. So can we take a wait-and-see approach to that rather than rush in with a huge amount of money doing earthquake strengthening? Across New Zealand, there's thousands of buildings that need to be refurbished, earthquake strengthened, and there just isn't enough money, engineers and builders to do it. So it's not possible to be able to do that, really. So there must be another way around that by, again, petitioning the government for a bit longer time, length to earthquake standards. Another example is the cycle path that's been proposed from Fielding to Ashurst, Fielding to Palmerston and from Palmerston to Fielding and to Ashurst. I'm a cyclist. I love to bike. I often go down the bridle track up to Linton. I go do the city loop. I go from Raukaura to Ashurst. I love it. I think the bridle track is a great asset, and whoever designed that is fantastic. Who approved that, wonderful asset for this community. And I would love a bike track to Fielding, but that's my wish list, and that's not necessarily a best thing for our society, really, for our community in a council a city that's in debt. I would love that. I don't think we need a nice wide bitumen sealed pathway. A good old crushed lime would do if we have to have it. I think it's a better idea. But again, it's a wish list, just for me to have, go and visit my mother in Fielding, which will be lovely. But it's not necessarily an essential. We need to look at essentials. When we're facing debt, I think we need to look at essentials and cutting down. Someone said to me yesterday, when the house has got a leak, when a roof has got a leak in it, you don't go and build a swimming pool. So that's something that I consider very strongly, that we have to look at essentials now and cutting costs, not spending money on things we don't need. Okay, I really think we need to conserve things and start tightening our belts. And I like the idea, Mr. Cuff's idea about questioning about the wastewater. Questioning is a good idea. Why can't we question the government, talk to Simeon Brown about that? And that brings me to my bee in my bonnet about the Featherston Street development, or lack of development. The cycle pathways that's going on there for the ghost cyclists that go past. I hardly see any cyclists using it. I know there's a idea that if you build it, people will come, but I don't see cyclists using Featherston Street. What I do see is huge traffic jams, taking people. A friend of mine took them 20 minutes to get from Watergrave Street to Rangatiki Street. And what people are doing is they're using Grey Street, they're using Tremaine Ave instead. I got stuck in Grey Street the other day going from around the Victoria Ave entrance to Ruahine. Took me half an hour sitting in a car. Now that's not great for the environment either, is it? My petrol car running all that time. And I wasn't the only one, obviously. So I don't consider the development to be all that wonderful. I don't quite understand why it stopped and then started so quickly afterwards. That's... I don't consider cycling as a great option in Palmerston. We're not Hawaii or Amsterdam. We don't have the most huge population, but we don't have the fine weather. We have the wind, the rain, we have the cold. We can't just hop on a bike with our 3 kids and go and do the groceries. It's not sustainable in Palmerston North. I don't understand why people think that we'll suddenly jump on bikes if there's a cycleway there, especially in the cold. It's just not going to happen in this. We have a high family environment, but also we have, as Tom was saying, an ageing population as well. So over 65-year-olds hopping on bikes isn't something that's going to happen too much around Palmerston. I could go on actually. I've got my Featherston Street thing, but I'll stop for questions because I've got 3 minutes left.
Yeah, thanks, Jackie. We have got some questions. Councillor Barrett.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thanks, Jackie. Plenty of threads to pick up there. I was just interested in your description around really appreciating and enjoying your own recreational experience along the river, riding on the path. And I just wondered why or how we might explain that to a resident in Bunnythorpe, or why we would deny that to them in their community.
Oh, sorry, I'm not even aware about the Bunnythorpe. Is there a Bunnythorpe loop? Is there something going to Bunnythorpe, is there?
Bunnythorpe's between Fielding.
I know
and Palmerston
Bunnythorpe is.
North, and
But
the proposal is
does
the
it go
shared
through
path.
Fielding? Yeah, through Bunnythorpe to get to Fielding.
Indeed.
Okay, well, that's your job, I guess. Yeah. But yeah, no, it's great. But the thing is, what I'm talking about, these things are wonderful, and yes, I'd love it. But do we have to look at essentials? And it's nice that they want a bike path, but do they want lower rates more? I mean, surely more is more important to save them a bit of money that way.
I
That's
guess
the thing. We all wish lists. Yeah.
What I'd like to get at is whether or not we should be listening to their views.
Of course, you listen to everybody. You listen to your ratepayers. Of course, you do.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Just wanted to follow up then too around your view that things shouldn't be sealed if we do put a shared path out there.
Sorry, sealed. Yeah.
Our understanding is that the cost of sealing the path is about 4% of the build cost, and that it would then drive up maintenance and operations cost in the future, which would have a flow-on effect to rates. So with that information, do you still think it should be unsealed?
I think it shouldn't be unsealed. I mean, I travel a lot of paths, not just here, but I do lots of paths outside the Manawa too. Very rarely I come across a path that's sealed. It's generally stones, it's lime, and they seem to be very well kept. I've all around Rupahu area, all those areas. There's no need for a bitumen wide sealed pathway, I don't think. No.
Even if it were to drive up maintenance costs in the future?
Does it really though? I mean, the prices I've seen it's decreased quite significantly. From looking after a lime pathway compared to a bitumen. I mean, I also don't know about the usage too, really, having such a wide path. Yeah.
Thanks for those replies. I'll concede to others.
Okay.
Thank you. Question from Councillor Bowen.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Jackie. I just wanted to pick up on your comments about proposed plans for housing, where you suggested, well, I wasn't sure what you were suggesting, so that's why I'm asking, empty houses and sections dotted around town.
Oh, sorry, yes.
Why can't they be used?
Well, actually, I did
those.
talk to someone else about that. It's not so much council. I didn't realise when I wrote that. It's not so much council land doing that. It's other government agencies. I found out, but I do drive around. I do see empty sections around the place, and empty houses, and I do often wonder why in the world those houses are empty. Often around the Highbury, Takaro area.
Okay. But you're not suggesting that council starts buying them?
I don't. I thought they might have been council land until I talked to a friend who said, no, that's, no. Yeah. So, my mistake, sorry.
Thanks for clarifying.
Thanks for your submission, Jackie. That concludes the time.
Thank you.
And that'll all be considered on the 29th and 30th of May.
Thank you.
I'd just like to invite Neil Jepson, submission number 1183.
Good afternoon, councillors, and thank you for the opportunity of speaking to my presentation. I need to disagree with the previous submitter who said something about people over 65 using bicycles. For me, that was about 12 or 13 years ago, and I bike every day. So, I'm not going to go through my submission, and I just want to make a few points regarding expenditure, and in particular the huge borrowings. Now, I hasten to add that I'm not an accountant, I'm not a financier, but 48 years ago I started a successful electronics business. That business is still operating, and I still put 8 or 10 hours per day into that business. So maybe I do know something about cash flows and borrowing. I have 4 points that I want to touch on briefly, and I'm not going to take you very long. The first one is seismic strengthening and the costs thereof, or therein. The seismic strengthening was a knee-jerk reaction by the government at the time in response to the Christchurch earthquakes, and I'm not belittling the damage that was done there. And if you visit Christchurch, the damage was astounding. But a risk assessment is needed, and I see in other submissions a number of people have mentioned a certain church in Palmerston North that's been in existence for almost 100 years, and in my submission I did a quick and dirty calculation on the chances of a death if people used that building and there was a dramatic earthquake in the next 20 years, and the chances were very, very low. So what I'm suggesting there is that that seismic strengthening is done only where necessary and where it has to be done, and deferred if possible. The second item that I want to briefly touch on is greenhouse emission targets. Now, any money that is spent by council on achieving greenhouse emission targets is going to do absolutely nothing for the city or for the ratepayer in the short term. And I use the word short term. I'm not an anti-green, and I certainly believe in the problem that mankind is facing, and we're doing our best to destroy the planet and making a fairly good job of it. But the jury is still out on some of the issues, and in particular carbon dioxide, CO2. Before I started my business, I was a scientist with DSIR, and my research projects were involved in CO2. And the CO2 level back then in the 70s was 330 parts per million. It's now over 400, so certainly CO2 is going up. But I don't know that there isn't a correlation between global warming and CO2. And if anybody's interested, I would refer you to a lot of research and very convincing papers written by Professor William Happer, Happer, from Princeton University. And it's well worth looking at. In particular, there are advantages of high CO2, and one of them is plant growth and food production. And there's absolutely no doubt that the Earth is a greener place now than it was 10 or 20 years ago because of the high CO2, the higher CO2 levels. The third thing I want to briefly touch on is wasteful spending and feel-good projects. Most ratepayers on sub-$100,000 wages or salaries would have an issue on the sort of sums that are talked about in the LTP, where the numbers are in thousands of dollars, and the LTP talks about tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, and millions, and we that are not involved in those big numbers have a problem with relating to the council debt of $100 million. But ratepayers are cognizant of wastage, and we can all think of instances where money has been wasted, and the numbers are such that people on salaries can relate to. And I'm thinking of items like $300,000 for plunder boxes, for example. The last item that I want to quickly touch on is the elephant in the room, and that is the wastewater, the stormwater and drinking water issue. And Rob has talked briefly about that. 30 years ago, I did a lot of electronics in the wastewater treatment plant and the sewage and the drinking water plant, the water treatment plant, and we knew about the issues then, but nothing's happened. So have we been sitting on our hands? The thing that worries me about that project and a lot of the other bigger projects is the cost of the IFF and the potential rates increases. And we all know that the two-digit rate increases for 3 years is not going to stop there. And it won't be the low end of 2 digits, it'll be the higher end. And the flagged $1,000 per year IFF is not going to stop at 1,000, and it's flagged at 30 years. Well, in 30 years' time, it will have been melded into general rates, and it will still be there in year 31. Which brings me to another point. Why is the IFF flagged as a separate amount? So, you know, the LTP talks about a 11 or 12% rate increase plus a $1,000 levy. For those of us that are paying rates, it's actually a 30 or 40% rate increase because $1,000 will be part of the rates. And these costs are going to be passed down the line by landlords and by business owners because they have to, and those cost increases are going to end up on the plate of people that can't afford those increases. And those are the people that are paying rent and the people that own houses, own properties, and are asset rich but cash poor. And I know a number of those people who are now talking about having to sell their properties because they can't afford the rates. I have a relative, for example, who isn't working because of age and health, and he tells me that the percentage of his income on rates is unbelievably high. I will finish with a quote from today's paper, and it was an article on Chris Luxon's speech to Auckland yesterday, and the quote was, "No big plans and dreams, bread and butter, back to basics without changing the direction of travel." And I think that's a pretty good quote. I will attempt to answer any questions you may have.
Yeah, thank you, Neil. Just firstly, a question from me. In terms of the rates increase that you've mentioned and the people that you've spoken to who suggest they might be forced to sell, do you have a suggested level of increase that would be more tolerated by those people?
That is a question with an obvious answer, as little as possible. No ratepayer is going to agree to a rate increase, but I'm well aware that council is in a difficult position, particularly with the bigger projects, the essential projects, and I think most ratepayers are sympathetic to that view. But council has got to consider getting back to basics and the feel-good projects. We don't need a community centre at Awapuni, and I live there. We don't need wasteful expenditure, and the previous Rob talked about the cycle lane, the dual cycle lanes in Pioneer Highway. I mean, I use that tar-sealed lane daily on the right-hand side. I never use the one on the other side because it's dangerous. Why have we got two?
Thank you. And question from Councillor Zebellin.
Thank you. Thanks, Neil. You were mentioning that emissions reductions programs somewhat dubious. I wondered if you had a view about spends and infrastructure strengthening programs for sort of handling more extreme weather or unseasonable weather events.
That's a little bit of a different matter. I think it's probably more proven that that climate change is responsible for a lot of the weather events that we get. They are a different issue from greenhouse emissions targets, because greenhouse emissions targets are not going to do anything right now. I mean, the New Zealand government right now is talking about digging coal and gas out of the ground as fast as they possibly can, because the government realises New Zealand cannot afford to not do that, and if New Zealand can't afford it, Palmerston North certainly can't.
And so infrastructure strengthening generally advisable?
That's a has to do.
Great, thank you very much.
Thank you, Neil, for your submission. That'll be considered on the 29th and 30th of May.
Thank you very much.
Just like to invite Murray Patterson, submission number 242. Is Murray here? Okay, we'll leave that one for now, and we'll invite Rowan Bell, number 908. Welcome. If you can just push your button.
Oh, yeah.
Lovely.
Yep, okay. Mr Mayor and fellow councillors, submission 908. I think this is the thing that works this, isn't it? It said. Oh, okay, we're away. Okay. Yeah, seems just to be a bit slow responding. Okay, this is my submission. It's basically to make it mandatory that all new housing developments incorporate 10% of the land to be used as a community orchard and garden within its plan. So I won't read my submission, but I have a few other points that I'd like to raise. And the first one is, I don't know whether you can read that, but it's pretty difficult. But anyway, we're basically living in a different world to our predecessors. And I think everybody here would agree that, you know, life's a lot different now than it was 20, 30 years ago, or even longer than that. Vegetable gardens basically were once a mainstay in New Zealand homes. Okay, Kiwis living in a quarter-acre section where they could, which provided for lawns, flower beds, and of course the humble vegetable patch. With more families now living in inner city suburbs, houses, apartments, and units, the garden is becoming more of a luxury than a prerequisite for a home. So, say hello to a community garden. Rather than saying goodbye to the backyard vegetable patch, many councils and communities are now encouraging Kiwis to say hello to community gardens. So, you know, community gardens is not a new concept. It's been around for quite a long time. But I think in this present day and age, it's becoming even more important to consider that. So, Housing New Zealand, Kangiora, basically I spoke to them the other day and asked them what their policy was on this, and they're fully endorsing this idea. And they say that now they have made a commitment to install planter boxes in every new house as a token of Community Kai project. So even though new houses that are being developed don't have the opportunity to have a vegetable patch, they said, okay, the next perhaps alternative is providing with a planter box where they can perhaps grow some herbs and maybe some vegetables you know, is better than actually doing nothing. One of the local community programs is Plant to Plate, and I think probably a lot of you will be well aware of that. It's a community program available to all primary schools across Palmerston North and District, which is run by teachers and volunteers. This concept is to integrate gardening and cooking into the school curriculum. Children to learn skills around growing and cooking their own food and learning ways to care for the environment and Earth's resources. Since it was first introduced in 2009, there are now over 30 schools in Palmerston North area involved in that program. The point that I'm making here is what happens to those children when they leave school, buy their first homes. What chance do they have to put this practice where their homes have no gardens? Another organisation is Growing Gardens and Communities. This group operates behind our Puni Community Centre, where people come for workshops or take part in working bees to learn about gardening, installing fruit trees and planter boxes in their current gardens and give them a start in gardening. But again, what about those kids in those homes? Will they not want to continue gardening when they move into these new homes of their own? There was a survey done back in 2020 by National Community Gardens Network, where 204 community gardens were surveyed and then analysed by the University of Canterbury. One of the findings from that survey was on how engaged they thought the communities surrounding the garden was. Over 50% of those surveyed had a positive view on the community garden. This shows that overall, community gardens appear to be succeeding. Vegetation framework for Palmerston North, okay, which, you know, a lot of you will be well aware of, and it's at the moment it's actually under review. Would this not be a great opportunity to include community gardens in that plan? The original plan, which was produced in 2016, did not mention this, but, you know, this is now an opportunity where it could actually be incorporated into it. Radio New Zealand, a program back in 2021 showed that community gardens provided more than just silver beet and beans. They provided a sense of engagement and belonging in a community. Community gardens may be one way we can provide kai while also tending to our mental health. Sean Robertson, Chief Executive of the Mental Health Foundation of New Zealand, stated recently, "The cost of living crisis is significantly impacting on our mental and physical health." There was recently an article in the Manawatu Guardian, which some of you may have read, but I'll just remind you about it. There was a resident in Kelvin Grove claims that there is no community hub. The suburb borders on the cemetery on one side and the main railway trunk line on the other, and the nearest thing to it, the community hub, is meeting at the self-checkout of the local supermarket. Now, I think that's a sort of a pretty sad state of affairs, that is. And okay, there's also some hidden benefits. Some of the other submissions have mentioned about drainage and stormwater. okay, drainage and storm water, okay, is one of the hidden benefits of green areas of a community garden and orchard. On stormwater and drainage and uptakes and storms, their cooling effect to combat planet warming, and not to mention bird song that it brings. We need to balance between more houses and the well-being of all its residents. So I will reiterate, write into your long-term plan that it's mandatory that all new housing developments incorporate a community orchard and garden within its plan. Okay.
Thank you, Rowan. There are no questions, but thank you for your submission today.
Okay, no problem.
I'd like to invite James Irwin, submission number 265. When you're ready. Press the button again. Yeah. Yep, you're away now.
Rowan, I enjoyed your talk. Oh, he's off. Is he gone? Oh, no, I enjoyed your talk. We've got a community garden on our street, so there you go. So my name's James Irwin, and I'm here to talk to the long-term plan. So, Your Worship, the Mayor, councillors, council workers, thanks for giving me the opportunity to speak. A couple of disclosures. So I sit on a group, Palmerston North Streets Ahead, that advocates for active transport in Palmerston North. I'm a doctor at our hospital, so I've got a bias towards being concerned about people's health, and I'm a father, so I'm concerned about kids' safety. I ride a bike and I drive a car. I've been listening to all of the presentations, and there's a lot of major decisions that council have to make about expenditure. There's increasing expectation about what council needs to deliver to the community, and legal requirements about how it's delivered. So it's all sounding very expensive, and there's not a lot of appetite for spending in the community. So the difficult decisions, and good luck. I'm just going to focus on one area, which is build infrastructure for active transport in the city. So when I talk to my friends outside of Palmerston North, I'm proud of our city for a few reasons. One of them is our multiculturalism. I think that our welcoming of refugees to our city and celebration of all the different cultures that are here is a really wonderful aspect of what we do, and a lot of the opportunities they have here is from council infrastructure that's provided to them. So I'm really proud of that. I'm also proud of the opportunities that we give our families and children in Palmerston North. When I talk to my friends who live in Wellington and Auckland and other places, I can brag really about the opportunities our kids have in comparison to bigger places where it's really hard to get to more than one or two activities in a day. Okay, so in regard to transport and infrastructure, the council has had a vision for this for many years, and it's been published in a lot of documents, and really it's that Palmerston North is going to be a great place to live and a place where we can all get about and easily access everything that's on offer, regardless if we walk or bike or scooter, or if we're in a wheelchair, or if we're in a car or in a bus. And I think that's a great vision. And I think that in regards to that vision, the things that we need to focus on are the things that are less well provided for, and that's pedestrian mobility, cycle mobility, disability mobility. And I think that these things have a lot of benefit for people. There's clear immediate health benefits of getting yourself around as opposed to driving about. There are psychological benefits in moving and feeling the wind on your face and interacting with the environment around you as you move through it. There's benefits to the community, and there's a lot more connection between people that move about on foot or on cycles or scooters. as opposed to in private motor vehicles. You meet people, you stop, you chat, and it contributes to our sense of community. And I also think that having an environment like that is really important for our families and kids, that the opportunity for children to become resilient and independent rests in part on their ability to do things for themselves. So instead of saying, hey mum, I want to go to Johnny's place, can you drive me, and then can you pick me up in an hour, they might say, hey mum, I'm off to Johnny's place, see you later, and they're gone. So the two documents I reference when talking of the Roads and Streets framework and the Urban Cycle Master Plan, and from these two documents I sort of see four main streams of thought. One is that the changes that need to occur to our urban environment, they need to be citywide. They can't be one or two, they need to connect. That the council is interested in introducing mode shift of our population away from private motor vehicle transport to other forms of transport. That there's a road user hierarchy involved in designing, and that safety is important. So firstly, in regard to citywide change, I think that's all fairly clear that if you have wonderful infrastructure for 50 metres either side of a school, it's not going to make people feel safe travelling to that school if they have to travel for 2 or 3 kilometres prior to that. So the changes need to be widespread enough so that people feel safe over their entire journey. In regard to mode shift, there's no benefit from building infrastructure if nobody uses it. So these things need to occur in a way that encourages our community to change the way they get about. And that's not easy. I think that every city in the world is struggling with this, and we're no different. The road user hierarchy is published in the Roads and Streets Roads and Streets framework, and just gives a priority of mobility, and I think it's a really good framework, and I'd love to see it included in future documentation, and that is that the highest priority of movement is given to pedestrians, then to cyclists, then to public transport, then to private vehicles, and then to parking. And, you know, at the moment it's not like that. When I bike to work, or when I drive to work, I'll see people standing at the intersection between Broadway and Victoria Avenue trying to cross the road, and they have to wait ages because there's just heaps of cars going past. And it's clear that the most important people in the way the city's designed at the moment are those that are driving, and the people that are walking just have to wait. Okay, next thing is safety. So just a light interlude. So I went to a meeting at Queen Elizabeth College a few weeks ago, which was talking about the long-term plan and also the Featherston Street upgrade. And William, you spoke, and there was you referenced a survey about safety and perceived safety cycling around Palmerston North, and that survey stated that it was perceived to be pretty safe. Well, I've got another survey. It's got a 100% response rate. There's only 5 people in the survey, and they're all my family. So I've been knocked off my bike on Featherston Street and Russell Street at that roundabout by a vehicle or driver didn't see me. My daughter Georgina's been knocked off her bike. She was cycling home from College Street and cycled into an opening door, and she fell out into the middle of College Street, but luckily nothing more happened. My other daughter Annabelle, she's no less she's not as safe a cyclist, but she hasn't had an injury, and my wife Catherine hasn't. My son Ben has been knocked off his bike cycling along College Street by a vehicle that turned off College Street across traffic, and didn't see him. So the majority of the respondents have had an injury cycling in Palmerston North, and they don't feel it's safe yet. Okay, so I think actually I've probably spoken enough. So I just really enjoy reading the vision that Council have put in previous documentation, and I just hope that it continues. Thank you, and happy to respond to questions.
Thank you, James. Appreciate you coming and making the submission. There don't appear to be any questions today, but we will consider all of what you've said when we deliberate on the 29th and 30th of May.
Can I deliver a metaphor then? I
Pardon?
wrote it, but I thought I'd run out of time.
You can use your time.
Okay, cool. So the metaphor is a boiling frog. I don't know if you've heard it, but if you put a frog into boiling water, it jumps out to preserve its life and survives. If you put a frog into cool water and slowly heat it up, the frog doesn't notice, and you can boil it and it dies. And I think public transport infrastructure and increase of private motor vehicles in society and cities is like that. Like, you sort of don't notice what's happening until there's so much congestion and traffic that it's really unpleasant. And, you know, we're not as bad as other places, like it's worse in Tauranga, it's way worse in Auckland, but we're getting there, and I think that we need to consider that we're a frog, and we need to get out of that water before it gets too hot. Yeah, that's it. Hope that was fun.
That was great. Thank you very much. And I'd just like to invite Grace Howe, submission 462.
Hi everyone, tēnā koutou katoa. I'm not going to go right through the submission because I know we've all got busy lives and I'm sure we want to get on with it, and I'm that kind of person. But just want to thank Mayor, Council and everyone for this opportunity. I am pretty much the kind of person that considers generating income for those who are resident in Palmy. We've got a great opportunity to encourage tourism. We've got so many absolutely beautiful things about Palmy, which makes it a desirable city. I just want to go through some demographics from the census, which is from 2018. I'm sorry I don't have updated data because apparently the census data doesn't update until the 29th of May. So when we look at our population, we've got a population of 84,639. We've got European, which is 71.5%. We've got Māori that are 15.3%. We've got Pacifica people, which is 3.7%. Middle Eastern, Latin, African, 1.1%. We've got other ethnic, which is 12.7%. We've got a median age here in Palmy of 34.0 years. We have a population of males, which is 41,286, females 3,053. We've got Māori, which is 15,807, and the Māori average age is about 23.3%. We've got born here in Palmy, in New Zealand, Aotearoa, 79.5%. Overseas, we've got 20.5%. Number of children here is about 33.6%. Employed full-time is 48.4%, unemployed is 4.7%. Those in full-time study is 24.4%, part-time 3.7%, owned or partly owned housing is 52.1%, and in a family trust we've got 10.7%. Now I bring those demographics to you, before you, because in the submission that I wrote, and I'm only going to refer to the larger projects, because I don't want to hold up everyone as well. I've got another meeting as well. So with regards to those submissions, with regards to the larger projects, I did write and say that the council should proceed with amendments with those projects that do not have a commercial or retail space. And the reason I wrote that is so that it would encourage, number one, the tourism, and it would generate an income for the Palmerston North City Council. The only concern that I had with regards to the projects are supply chain issues, possibly transportation costs and any production delays, which will send, because what the council has shown us is that those long-term plans are just basically estimates at the moment, but those costs could go up. They could change if there's war, it could change the political, economic, social, whatever, it could all change. So I'm saying, yeah, go for it. But I'm also saying with caution, proceed with caution. Because if we've got a median age of 34 years, I'm sure that going into their retirement, especially if we've got people younger, they don't want to be going into a retirement age where they've got huge debt and they just affordability is something that they can't do. And I just believe that when the council does these projects, because it's going to generate income, you know, you've got to have a space for retail, which will also, because I look around Palmerston North and the businesses are not flourishing, but we've got an opportunity with regards to those projects that the council are doing to generate some type of income and create, creative ways of generating that income as well. And so that's where I come from. And I just wanted to say, yeah, thank you for your time.
Thanks, Grace. There don't appear to be any questions, so thank you for your submission, and that'll be considered at the end of the month.
Thank you.
Just like to invite Robert Gibb, submission number 1187. When you're ready.
Thank you. Is the PowerPoint just there? Yep, thank you. So this is a slide, a graph that I've used a number of times now. I used it on Monday as well as using it 6 years ago. On Monday, I introduced the key thing is the additional 2023 IPCC aims, which included tipping points. Tipping points are irreversible in our lifetime, probably irreversible on a century time frame. Once they start to tip, we lose control. So you do not want to include tipping points. Effectively, any emissions over and above the green dotted line are vastly increasing the tipping point probability of triggering them. So the first thing I wanted to do is I've laid on top of that your plans from 6 years ago, which was a 25% in 5 years, and I said that that wasn't sufficient. But hey, you've achieved 31 in the 6 years, so that's good. And in fact, that puts you right on target of the 6.5% reductions. Fantastic, on track. Keep the pressure up. You've got to keep it up at that rate all the way through to 2050. Next slide. Sorry, I can do the next slide. Yes. Unfortunately, population hasn't done quite so well in the intervening time. Their per capita has gone up by 7%. So you've got a target, and I'm not quite sure how rock solid this target is, but you've put a target in the strategy document of down 44% by 2034. And what you'll see is that even that is not actually steep enough. That does not get you down to that 6.5 degree curve. And this is the problem. The longer you leave it, the steeper you have to get. That's fine. That's the next slide. We jumped the gun there. Okay, so the next couple of slides, what I've done is I've had a look. I must say, searching through the documents is difficult to really put together the detail. Superficially, it seems great. There's a great fairy dust of low carbon words scattered right the way through the document, but when you delve in deeply, the dots didn't quite connect. And so, for instance, this is your own document, so I'm not expecting you to read the detail on there. Suffice to say, there's great governance aspirations declared on the Climate Change and Sustainability Plan, but when you go through to the governance document, there's no mention there whatsoever of climate change in the decision-making, despite the fact that it is supposed to be the first thing considered on all decisions. There are also some great aspirations on that climate side. We want to be leaders. in all our decision making, etc. But I think there's no actual detailed annual reduction in there for each of the sectors of Palmerston North City Council: corporate, residents and business. There is that 44%, but it's not quite clear how that applies, because it's only in one of the three places that that sort of information could appear. And I would have thought if it was a top headline thing, it should be headlined, but it's buried, and it's buried in the strategy document, so I'm not quite sure where that sits. Moving on to the transport components, those are mentioned in both the climate and then in the on the climate plan, so that's fantastic. And once again, there are great aspirations on the transport plan. City's population grows, we need to adopt a more proactive and planned approach to reducing environmental impacts. But unfortunately, we then chose to grow out instead of in and up. And out means that you don't get an increase in density, and therefore the new electric public transport network has to work harder, then it's not going to be picked up so easily. Whereas if we had focused on in and up, then you get increasing density and you get increasing efficiency of use. So we've adopted the wrong policy there in terms of knitting everything together. Sorry, I realised I changed my own version, but not your version. There was the version of that one there. Moving on to the next one. Thank you. So the next one is looking at the economic aspirations. Well, once again, the economic aspirations that have been put forward there are carried through the blue circle. But there's only one initiative. There's a plan and then the execution of the initiative. And I'm wondering if the idea is to get down to 6.5% to 7% per annum reduction, is that one initiative going to be sufficient? There's also some missed opportunities. We want to have a low carbon city economy, but when we put in the infrastructure, there's no mention under the infrastructure section for how low carbon emissions is going to be achieved through that infrastructure implementation. Similarly, we talk about attracting major events. Major events are typically accompanied by significant travel from right across New Zealand and possibly further afield. But unfortunately, emissions is not on the things that we're going to monitor in terms of the performance of the events. So I've picked out a number of things there of ways where the fairy dust doesn't quite connect. And I think that's a deep problem throughout the system, from what I can see. And so I'll simply conclude by saying, absolutely, low carbon economic growth and lifestyles are no longer nice to haves, they are now urgent imperatives. Furthermore, people may get grumpy, and we've heard some of that grumpiness at the need for continuous change, but if we don't change, the environment will happily cripple both our economy and our lifestyles. It just won't take any notice. Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to talk, and I've been talking as usual on behalf of the All Saints Green Task Force, but also the participants of last year's 2023 Palmy Climate Conversation Starters, about which I presented 9 months ago. Thank you.
We have a question from the Mayor.
Thanks, Robert, as always, for your considered submission. Just on major events, what's the solution there? Because, I mean, it impacts hospitality, impacts retail, it impacts accommodation, impacts basically tens of thousands of jobs.
Sure, absolutely. One way would be to absolutely focus on the transport side of things for all the external visitors. You know, really putting pressure on really good train train travel, public transport, and so on and so forth. So that's not going to happen overnight. But there needs to be a strategy to satisfy that in order for people to be able to do it appropriately, if that turns out to be a major impact. But at the moment, with emissions not being assessed as part of it, we don't know. I've suggested it is, but that needs to be looked at closely.
Okay, thank you.
And question from Councillor Zabelin.
Thank you. Thanks, Robert. I did ask this question of another submitter you might have heard. Do you feel that we are budgeting and planning appropriately to strengthen our infrastructure against other wider impacts, such as extreme weather, runoff from intensity, things like that?
We're probably strengthening it for the current plan layout, if you like. But I have serious misgivings around developing on both sides of the Mangoni. Because as soon as you constrain the Mangoni to not be able to overflow on either of its banks, which is what happens when you put it on the second side, and this was what I said on Monday, Cyclone Gabriel, according to NIWA, basically has changed the view of the repetitiveness of high impact flooding events. So previously it was thought that that would be a 1,000-year event, but it is now thought to be a 500-year event. 2004 changed our perspective on 500-year events and turned them into 100-year events. What we are seeing is, with climate change, the frequency of those very large events is going to increase enormously. And so we are putting ourselves at extreme risk to prevent flooding on both sides by forcing ourselves to build our infrastructure strong enough to withstand those severe events. And building on both sides of a stream is bad news in that regard.
Thank you. That's helpful.
Thank you, Robert. That concludes your time, and that will
Thank
be
you.
considered at the end of May. And the final submission for this session is from Dan Martia, submission 1219. Welcome, Dan.
Good afternoon. Ena iwi, ena mana, ena rangatira mā, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. My name is Dan Matia. I am currently the chairperson of the Awapuni Recreation and Community Centre. In my submission, I'm not worried about dollars and cents because while they're important, I think they're secondary to the social implications and consequences of providing the Awapuni hub. I'd like to start with the final paragraph of my submission and say, look, the council has the land, the council has the will, and there is little purpose in delaying a project which you all know has been endorsed by an independent consultative study in November last year from the SPG group. I spent a lot of time talking to people putting together what I put in my submission, and then when I was preparing for this afternoon, whoa and behold, I found on the internet a feasibility study done for the council last November, of which you all participated and ran a number of workshops. And so I end up in the position of saying, you know more about my submission than I do myself. But that's a good thing. The hub at Awapuni is important. I'll just spend a couple of minutes talking about the library. The library is the busiest in Palmerston North. It's poised for growth. 15,000, 19,000 people live in the Awapuni catchment area, or residential area at this stage, and it's projected that another 6,900 or so will be added to it in the coming years. The resources the community have are insufficient. The library is beyond fit for purpose. I have been told about drainage at the back door, people having to mop up and clean up before they can get in to use it. The staff, from what I can gather, don't have reasonable staff facilities in which to sit down and have a cup of tea in some privacy. You know, that's a fairly fundamental thing that we try to provide in the workplace these days, is that staff do have somewhere where they can withdraw and relax. The size is inadequate. If the librarians foster or use a group from Awapuni Primary School, and there are other people, the library begins to become overcrowded, noisy and uncomfortable. It has a limitation of 90 people. The library can hold more than that. And here's another telling factor. In Awapuni, the only public toilet is at the library. And if the library is closed, then people have to make their way all the way down to Newbury Street to the community hall to find a public toilet. And that's not reasonable, certainly not for parents with little kids. Awapuni needs this library to preserve its local heritage and history. You know, libraries are renowned for preserving the truth. And the truth of a community lies in what resides in the library. Awapuni is not one of the flashiest and most expensive suburbs in Palmerston North, and we all know that. Morale is often low and poor. The provision of a library provides a community centre where people can socialise and mix and do any number of things that modern libraries take under their wing to do. It's not just about books and paper. An up-to-date library, a new library, would provide the resources, for instance, computers, games, puzzles, performances. There are a lot of things that they can do that they can't presently do at the moment, which they could offer to families and people in Awapuni who are not that well off. It's a good way for people in Awapuni to save money as well, because in the loaning of books and resources and software, people get access to things that they wouldn't be able to afford in their everyday life. The provision of this hub, combined with the Awapuni Hall, provides a wonderful resource across the community. It will provide social, cultural well-being. It makes for neighbourhood connections. It should develop partnerships with both the iwi and with the council through the council staff. The Awapuni Hall provides for larger activities for bigger groups of people. The new hub will provide smaller meeting places which are more intimate and probably more appropriate and useful to smaller groups. I dream and think about the way in which this hub could develop with its hall. I believe there is a paper walkway that links Panako Place with the Awapuni Hall. And I'm reminded of some discussions I used to have with a gentleman in Palmerston North, Dr. Brian Booth, who some of you may remember, who was very strong on developing the ward approach to councils and bits and pieces. Now, I'm not advocating that, but what I am advocating is one of the reasons and strong points that Dr. Booth had behind wanting to have wards, is that it developed the village ethos. The current provision of this kind of facility across the city is uneven. There are 6 places like Awapuni Hall in the eastern part of the city, and only 3 in the western part. I would certainly like to see the council redress that and balance the act a little bit. I talk about mostly the library, but when I'm talking about it, I mean the hub as well, because it's more than the library. It's going to be a community centre. I've talked about creating and preserving social contacts, common meeting places, getting support for things that individuals need, such as help with CVs and understanding city events. It provides language support, particularly for second language learners and migrants. We have a growing number of migrants who live in our community. The library will provide for creative outlets. The current librarians run a number of holiday programs and projects, but they find that when they've got those booked out, the stresses and strains of the library become tested. Now, somebody once said, I can't remember whose name was, I think it was a chap called Neil Gaiman, or Neil Gaiman. He said that you can go to the internet and looking for something, and you can find 100 answers. But in a good library, you'll find one librarian who can find you the right and the best answer. And I think that's, quite an important factor. Libraries are a real means for a lot of people these days to reach into and connect to the digital world. And it's not possible to a great extent at Awapuni at present. I think I'll wind myself up to a halt about there, otherwise I'll run the risk of repeating myself by saying the library is a reflection of society. The more appropriate and encompassing a library is, the chances of reflecting a better society is enhanced. A small back-of-the-block library is outmatched by some of the more recent libraries and hubs in our region. And I'm thinking about Te Awaho, Niue'i, Stroom and Foxton. If we had something as good as that, we would be mighty proud.
Thank you, Dan. You have used up your time, so there won't be time for questions now, but thank you for your submission.
Got to the last word just in time too.
Thank you. So we will take a half an hour break now. We'll be back here at 4 o'clock. Okay, welcome back everyone. We're going to make a start for the next session, session 9 of our long-term plan submissions. Just for those of you who are here, welcome. You will have 10 minutes each, and I would encourage you not to use up the whole 10 minutes so that we do have some time to ask questions. So 10 minutes including questions, and at 9.5 minutes the screen will go orange just to indicate that you've got half a minute to go. So first up, I'd like to invite Julia Manson, submission number 962. Welcome. So if you can just push the right hand button. Thank you.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Julia Manson. I live out at London. My submission is mainly around the rates review, and there's a few questions in there that I would like you to answer after I have finished, please. I have taken on the option, or preferred the option, of land value. For well over 100 years, land value has always been the way in which rates have been charged out. Why change now? Land value is equal footing. It doesn't penalise you for what you have on your land. The land might be more expensive in different areas, however, it doesn't judge as to what you have on it. As I see it, the only reason for the change is nothing more than a money grab. It is an idea that this council has come up with to tax more money out of the ratepayers. Hybrid and capital are both options that invade your home. Both attack the heart of the person's home and take ownership by way of taxing us not only off our land, but out of our homes as well. I accept that you need to rate the land for funding the city core duties. Don't touch my home. This council is proposing to rate us off our piece of land, and now you're wanting to attack my home. Council stated in both the pamphlet and the letter to ratepayers that some of you are asking for change and some of you are asking for change or asking for different rating systems. Who do you refer to when you state some of you? And what numerical figure does some equate to? You also stated that for every option we are proposing to reduce the current level of discount for rural and semi-service properties between 0.2 and 5 hectares, often referred to as lifestyle blocks. These ratepayers will have a larger rate increase than most other property owners. Why? And I would really like to know, please, why? I have never minded paying my fair dues. This is not fair dues. I just wonder if it's even legal for people different to others, legal to rate people different to others because they live outside the city and called lifestylers. What services do lifestylers get at their doorstep that others don't get? Lifestylers who get water are charged for the privilege. Not only is the meter charged, which I have been told is a charge for maintaining the pipes, also every drop of water that goes through the meter is charged. Roading and drainage, I consider a very contentious issue. No sewerage, no rubbish collection, no public transport, no white lines on the road, no footpaths, no street lighting, and then to top the insult off, we have to pay consent fees to put in our own sewerage system. We have been on our property for over 34 years. I propose that the rating system remain land value and that instead of thrusting the extra charges onto the current lifestylers, that you look at charging new owners of lifestyle blocks at a suitable date. This way, the new owners will know what is being charged in their rates and the current owners will not find themselves so disadvantaged. This way, everyone will know where they stand and there are no surprises. It could also be proposed that all homes are fitted with a water meter. It may be that the unnecessary use of water would be curbed quite substantially. This cost would also offset the cost of piping. Not all lifestylers are rich. It is a way of life that many of us have chosen many years ago, and now it is as if we are being singled out and penalised. Our neighbours, aged 86 and 89, have been in their small lifestyle block for over 61 years. And I'd like to see who's over 61 in here. Not very many, if any. It is appalling that this council is just so economically incompetent, and now you have the audacity to place the burden of your reckless spending onto the ratepayers and future ratepayers. The $30 million that the previous government gave to this council as a three-water bribe. What did this council spend it on? Was it water infrastructure? Heck no. Cycle lanes, drainage crossings, flower pots down Pioneer Highway, $11 million on a walk bridge, Featherston Street debacle. Gosh, even a kid wouldn't have thought to put a bus stop in the middle of the road. The council's main core duties to the people are water, rubbish and roads. The past 6 years has seen this council throw good money after bad. No thought has been given to your core duties. This council has allowed the previous government to run roughshod over the governance of our city and allowed their ideology of bikes and buses infiltrate our city and our financial status. This really is an unhealthy obsession. This government has this council has squandered and wasted ratepayers' money on things that are wants and not needs, especially at a time when money is very hard to come by. Even your auditor stated that your future plans might not be realistic. So why are you throwing our money after bad? It's very hard to come by that money, folks. Shame on you lot. Because of this council out-of-control spending on nothing more than ill-thought-of, unplanned items that could have waited due to the financial situation that the city is in. But no, instead this council has spent up large. We'll just borrow more money and put the bill on our kids and steal it from today's ratepayers. Because of your reckless spending, you are now stealing my money to pay for it. This council is killing our city and the people in it. This council needs to be made more accountable for the management of our city and our money. Kia ora, thank you.
Thank you, Julia. Are you happy to answer some questions?
Yes.
Firstly from the Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Look, thank you, Julia, for your impassioned views. Just a couple of questions to you. I'm not sure where the 30 million figure you spoke about came from, but we did get 10 million in the first tranche. Do you know what that was actually spent on?
I was told that it was spent on bicycle lanes and bicycle lanes.
Okay, I'll tell you what it was spent on. Stormwater. And all 10 million was spent on stormwater.
Okay.
All right,
I'll
second
take your
question.
word for that.
Second question. Are you aware that rural ratepayers, and look, I've got some real sympathy for what you're saying about the rural levies, etc. I'm a rural ratepayer myself, but they do pay less than urban ratepayers because they get less services, direct services. And are you aware that there is a differential or a reduced rate?
Yes, I'm fully aware of that, but so are the services we get.
Yeah, exactly. So at the moment it's 37%, and the rates are discounted 37%. Are you aware what other cities are discounted to?
I'm not talking about other cities, sir. I'm talking about Palmerston North.
Other
and the
cities are in the realm of around 20%.
Regardless of what they do, that is their business. I'm talking about here.
Okay, I'm just making you aware. Thank you.
Councillor Ballin.
Thank you, Julia. You mentioned in your written submission about sort of government mandates dictating council work program. Do you have a view on how we should be responding to unfunded mandates?
I'm not quite with you, dear. I'm not so
seismic strengthening,
clued up.
Seismic strengthening or upgrades that the government require us to do but don't financially assist us to do?
After reading an article in Stuff yesterday, I will not answer that.
Okay, thank you. I had one other. You made mention of the questioning the legality of rating different groups differently. And you mentioned rating new lifestyle blocks to a different rate to existing urban ones. So do you want to just explain where you sort of would like to see us go with that?
Well, I mean, if you want to rate us not only on the land but on the house as well, then be a little bit more fairer. Instead of knocking us for like bang, wait until the new people come on. At least they know by then what they're going to get. That's how I view it. Don't come in and start hitting us.
Okay, so a more staged or managed implementation.
Yes.
Great, thank you. That's helpful.
Thank you, Julia. You did ask some questions during your submission, and those, this is not really the time to be able to fully answer those, but if you want to ask one of us after the session, you'd be welcome to do that. But the issues you've raised will be considered on the 29th and 30th of this month.
Thank you, dear.
Thank you.
Thank you, people.
So I'm going to invite Milia and Zaina from the Palmer Youth Council. Now, submission 1166. Welcome. If you just pop both the microphones on. Over to you.
Kia ora koutou. Thank you, Madam Chair and Council, for having us today. My name is Malia Charman.
My name is Zaina Hilal, and it is our privilege as the co-chairs of the Palmer Youth Council to present here today. We're really grateful for the opportunity to present the vibrant and diverse voices of Palmer's youth and present our submission, which is the culmination of our extensive efforts and passionate contributions from our young community members. We're so grateful to have the opportunity to speak on behalf of Palmer Youth, who are the ones who made it possible for us to be here today, by sharing their thoughts and voices with us. We'd also like to acknowledge our submissions committee, who did the hard part of writing our written submission, and a special mention to our secretary alongside the rest of our executive committee. Our submission highlights several key areas that we believe are crucial for Palmerston North's development over the next decade. Firstly, the safety of our roads is paramount. We need to ensure that all road users, especially our young people who walk, cycle and drive, can travel without fear. Enhancing road safety measures, including better signage, pedestrian crossings and cycle lanes, is essential to protect lives.
Secondly, a robust and accessible public transportation system is vital for our city. Many young people rely on public transport for school, work and social activities. We advocate for more frequent and reliable services, along with youth-friendly initiatives such as discounted fares and improved routes. This will ensure that young people can navigate our city with ease and affordability. Thirdly, our generation is acutely aware of environmental challenges we face. To secure our city's future, we must promote green initiatives and sustainable practices. This includes increasing green spaces, enhancing recycling programs, and supporting renewable energy projects. The health of our environment directly impacts the health of our community.
Additionally, we need infrastructure that meets the needs of a growing and dynamic youth population, which means not only educational facilities and the recreational spaces, but also safe and modern public amenities. Investing in youth-friendly infrastructure is an investment in the future of Palmerston North. Another issue is regarding the availability and the quality of youth services, which directly impacts our well-being and development. We need to enhance the access to mental health support, career counselling and recreational programs. Ensuring that these services are easily accessible and adequately funded are crucial for nurturing the potential of our young people.
Furthermore, Palmerston North is home to a diverse student population from various educational institutions. We need to create an environment that is welcoming, supportive and inclusive for students. Enhancing their experience will contribute to the vibrancy and cultural richness of our city. Lastly, affordable and suitable housing is a pressing issue for many young people. We advocate for policies that address the affordability and availability of housing, ensuring that young people can find safe and secure living arrangements as they transition into adulthood.
So, despite the variation in all these topics, they do represent and reflect the comprehensive nature of our concerns and our commitment to a better future. However, we have noticed a significant gap in the long-term plan regarding youth-focused initiatives, which is particularly concerning given the emphasis on play in PNCC's sectors. We've outlined clear, actionable and necessary strategies for the Council to address this gap and incorporate youth-centric policies in the LTP. Palmerston North is indeed a unique and growing city, rich in potential and opportunity. However, its development should not overlook the youth population, as we are the future. We deserve a city that is not only safe, accessible, and environmentally conscious, but also one that nurtures our potential and helps us achieve our aspirations. So, as our city grows, it is your obligation to ensure that youth is not left behind, because we must move forward as a collective.
What we have said here has been corroborated by many young voices throughout Palmerston North. We are here to hold you accountable for what Palmerston North should be in the next 10 years, a future-focused and youth-friendly city. We urge you to consider our submission with the attention it deserves. The voices of the youth are not just the voices of tomorrow, they are the voices of today. Let us work together to create a Palmerston North that we can be proud of, a city that truly reflects the hopes and dreams of its young citizens. We have done our part and will continue to do so with the passion it requires. It is up to you to fulfil your obligations to the current and future youth of the city. Thank you for your consideration. Amihi.
Thank you.
Thank you both. We've got a question from Councillor Wood.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, team, for coming in and presenting. I see one of the notes in your submission is you suggested putting speed humps outside locations that sell alcohol. I was just wondering what the thinking was there, what benefit you're trying to gauge.
Okay, first, it's basically because I think the idea behind it is that people like drunk, I think it's about drunk drivers. I think so, because often alcohol shops, there was a submission around that a while ago, which I think did not pass, which was opening another liquor store that was close to a park, I believe. So a lot of liquor stores are positioned around these kind of public spaces that a lot of youth actually, I guess, go around. So I think the idea is to create just a safer thing, because I guess speed bumps aren't a bad thing when it comes to like slowing people down, especially people who might be drunk driving.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Question from Councillor Bowen.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you both for coming in, and thank you for the huge amount of information you've packed into both your verbal and written presentations. I had a couple of questions. So in your list of things you think would help, thank you. In youth events and activities, I thought that was really interesting, because you talk about music performances, sports tournaments, cultural festivals. I suppose I'm going, well, we already do a lot of those things. So what would we do that would be different to what we already do?
It doesn't necessarily have to be different. There's just been a lot of positive feedback from a significant amount of youth in the community saying that they do enjoy these, but it would be amazing to see it more frequent and throughout more spaces in the community, not just, as we can see, it's largely in the square, so more across the community.
Yeah, and also a lot of them are quite focused towards families and like younger children, or sometimes uni students. There's no like in between for, I guess, our age range, or if there is, we don't really know about it that much. So I guess bridging that gap so that they're like more well known, because I feel like a lot of people would go to these events if they knew more about them.
Okay, and is that where the proposed Palmy Youth Ball idea came from? Something that's not school, not university, just people? And is that something you think the Youth Council could do?
Yep, happy to be involved.
Yes.
Happy to be involved, happy to do?
Happy to work with you to do.
I see what you did there, too smart for me. And in the creation of opportunities bit, you talked about promoting career growth. And I just wanted to find out from you, is the Youth Council connected with like the Young Business Chamber or Manawatu Young Professionals Network? Do you have those connections?
It has been discussed, and we're looking to create a connection to, I think it is called the Manawatu Young Business Chamber.
Yeah. Okay, I am happy to work with you to do that.
That'd be amazing, thank you.
Thank you. Thanks very much.
Councillor Barrett.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Thank you both. Just wanted to pick up on that final point that you raised about the future focus, and you talked about planning for the youth of today and the youth of tomorrow. I just wanted to kind of understand what you thought the balance should be between, if there's competing priorities there.
Could you reframe the question, please?
Yeah, just how much weight should we be putting on kind of the youth of today versus the youth of tomorrow in prioritizing decisions? Or do you see them as perfectly
I
aligned?
get the question. So my understanding of that is kind of the youth of today, we're going into tomorrow as well. But I think one of Palmy's things is that it's not like it I guess has been in the past, a student kind of led city. I think it's just about maintaining that so that the young people do stay here to, I guess, stay as the young people of tomorrow.
Great. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Question from Councillor Zabelin.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Ngā mihi kia kōrua. We have got some funding proposed for a youth wellbeing plan, and work's still being done on what that might include. So if you were going to pick 3 top things that would make a big impact, do you have some immediate ideas? I'll put you on the spot of what we could be focusing on.
Well, we were both at that youth wellbeing forum, and there's a lot to talk about from that, but three main
ideas for what exactly?
What kind of role council could be playing in contributing to youth wellbeing in the city?
Emphasis on funding for the more mental health and education kind of side of youth wellbeing.
As well as I think, I guess, I don't know if this is kind of answering the question or not, but with those networking events that we had, having council come along, like some people, so that we can kind of, again, bridge that gap between young people and council. And I don't know what a third thing could be.
You can come back to us.
Maybe we should put it on an Instagram poll and get back to you.
That's a great idea. Also, and just in terms of bridging the gap more widely, how do you think council could connect more with younger people to let them know what's going on?
Well, you have an amazing media team, especially the TikTok, and what we've heard about that. But media, again, is a phenomenal way to reach out to youth, and the getting involved with schools at the moment, which has been happening recently, has been incredibly effective, I think, from what I've heard from youth in the community. Obviously, we can't represent all of Palmerston North youth just with 2 voices, but we'll do our best. But that is something that we've especially seen.
Even if it's just coming along to the events and just having that face-to-face conversation, I think that would be really impactful as well.
Thank you very much.
Thank you both. That concludes your time, and your submission will be considered on the 29th and 30th of May, along with everyone else's.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Can I just check if John Monroe is here? No? Okay, so we'll move to Jill Brider from Cassia Birch Trust Board, submission 959. Welcome, Jill.
Kia ora koutou. We're going to start with a small exercise because I can see that you're really excited about another whole day of submissions. So the gallery can do this too if you want to play. Right, so I want you to hold out your fist in front of you if you've visited Kate Birch House. I want to see your fists. There we go. That's good. Well done. Is the gallery playing? Yeah, good. I love that. Okay, now I want you to put your thumb up if you've walked around the gardens and the grounds of Kate Birch. Okay. I want you to hold your other fist out in front of you if you've visited the Coach House archives at Kate Birch. This is good. Well done. I want you to put your thumb up if you've ever taken family and friends to Kate Birch, grounds or gardens. Oh, see, look at all those 2 thumbs up for Acacia Birch House. Well done. That's my submission, no. So back in 1993, when I was 17, I used to bike to Teachers College via the bridge over the lagoon, and I'd look wistfully down Wisteria Lane and wondered who owned that big, glorious old house. Turns out I did. As a proud Palmy resident via PNCC, my rates contribute to the house and the grounds. And now as I sit here, as the slightly older, proud Palmy resident and chair of Acacia Birch Trust, I sit here to ensure that the current and future generations can enjoy the grounds, the house and the history of this jewel of our city. As a board, and I represent my 5 board members, our key objective is to support the future for the house and gardens as a Category 1 heritage property and keep it in the hearts and minds of our community. We do this by supporting PNCC's financial contribution to maintenance and preservation of the house and the gardens for future generations, and enabling current residents to enjoy the facilities that it offers, a premier homestead house in a tranquil and peaceful setting in the heart of the city, maximising the heritage values of the house and opportunities for the public to visit and learn about their history. The Acacia Birch were really pleased to see the $6 million that was tagged for the strengthening of Acacia Birch We know it's in year 10. We want it way earlier than that, as you can imagine, but we're really stoked that it was still there. And we'd also feel really strongly about making sure that the operational costs carry on for Acacia Birch when it comes to things like maintaining our staff and looking to invest into a master plan. That's all I've got to say. So you can ask me some questions or you can let me go.
Councillor Johnson.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Thanks, Jill. Just about the master plan.
Yes.
I guess we've got other master plans for, other parts of the city, but I suppose they're more extensive.
Yeah.
So what are you envisaging might be in a master plan for Acacia Birch?
I think it's more around making sure that we protect the heritage of the gardens as well as the house itself. So we don't have any sort of master plan as such yet for Acacia Birch. So that's where the money would be tagged for, to make sure that for future generations it's looked after and actually keeps that heritage status.
Okay. I guess I'm just struggling as to how that might be different to what we would be doing anyway in terms of the maintenance and upkeep of the gardens and the building.
Yeah, and
are you thinking about development in some way? Or?
So I think it's more around the idea that there could be potential to look at what the connection with the lagoon and things like that we could actually incorporate into the master plan, because we don't actually have one yet, and so we can work with the council and support that from a trust.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Question from the Mayor.
Nailed, thank you.
Councillor Bowen.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Jill. Were you aware that in the June work programme for the Culture and Sport Committee, there is a report due to be presented for the development of conservation plan for Acacia Birch House and property costed and included in the Acacia Birch House master plan programme of work for 2023-24?
Yes.
Has the Trust Board had an opportunity to be to contribute to that piece of work?
No.
Okay, thank you for that. I'll follow that one up. And then also, you'll have seen in some of the other submissions, maybe, or maybe not, if you haven't read them, there were a couple of submissions where people suggested that Acacia Birch House was of no value to the city, and in fact was a cost that we could offload off our books by selling it to anybody who'd have it. Do you have a comment on that?
I would be pretty sad to see it sold as a house, because I think as a heritage category 1, it's one of our only standing buildings in Palmerston North, and the history that we can associate with that, which we've got all sorts of different community groups who can value that house, from military to nurses to, at one point it was a teachers' college. It would be a huge loss, and I don't actually know who would buy it, because it might be worth, what did council buy it for? $2 at the time? Might be a little bit more now.
And a question from the Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I've remembered the other part of what I was thinking now. So the floor is being done now, isn't it, upstairs?
That's right.
How far of the way is it through?
Well, we'll be back open earlier. It's supposed to be the 11th of July, and I believe it's going to be June that we'll be open. Yeah.
And the $6 million is for other strengthening?
Yes, yeah, so that was around the stability around the walls and things like that.
But it's a wood building.
Yeah, I don't make the rules, Grant.
Yeah. Strange. Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Jill. That concludes all the questions. Oh, sorry, if we got one online. Leonie, have you got a question? Councillor Harbitter. How do I get?
Thanks, Jill. Great presentation.
Over to you, Councillor Harbitter.
Yeah, thanks, Jill. Great presentation. Hey, just one question to you.
We can't hear you just yet. Try again.
Thanks, Jill. Can you hear me now? Hello, can you hear me now?
Can you maybe send your message through the chat, Leonie? We can't hear you, sorry.
Don't worry.
Just going to leave it? Okay. We can follow up with that later, perhaps. But thanks, Jill, for your submission. That will be considered at the end of the month.
Thank you.
Now, I'd like to invite Peter French, submission 1089. So if you just press the button on the microphone, the right-hand side. Thank you.
Thank you. I've got a little bit small image. Thank you, Madam Chair. Kia ora. Greetings, everyone. I'm here to speak. About my passion. The Vogel Street part of my submission. Back up here. Right. In particular, the Featherston. It might change to the other image. The picture here is the Featherston Street, Hayden Street, Vogel Street intersections, and I'll just get rid of the one on the left. Oh, there it is. There. Should come back up. Oh, it was here. Where's it gone? Lost my image. Does my image come back up? Pulled it out.
We're just working on it.
Oh yeah, may have
Won't be a
pulled the button.
moment.
Yeah. Yeah. So this. Yeah, that's right. That's the first image. That's all right. Doesn't matter. You can't pick up my. I've got the cursor moving here, so it's not picking this up. But this must be the image that I emailed in. This is the image I emailed in. Okay. If you look on the left, I've drawn some blue lines, and I'll explain that in just a moment. I just want to go back to the Economic Growth Committee meeting of the 24th of April, 24. A couple of recommendations were passed. They received They received the feedback that was received. It had the original submission on page 11, which I want to explain what that's about today. And then you also passed the recommendation, this one, which says that council install 3 raised pedestrian crossings in Vogel Street. I'm not concerned about that. And right-hand turn bay into Featherston Street. What I noticed there, because during the committee meeting you also discussed right-hand turn bay into Hayden Street, but the actual words here only say Featherston Street. So what I'm interested in is how flexible is this? What do you call them? The Transport and Development team, are they flexible to, at the moment, to have a look at my idea, which I'm going to talk about in a moment? Or does the council members need to, if they like my idea, get back to them and say, well, please have a look at this. Please have a look at this. So let's have a look at, this is a technicality. Okay. Oh, well, let's have a look. See, this idea here, which I submitted last year, I can't use the mouse. It's not showing, but if you're coming up Vogel Street, just before Featherston Street, I'm suggesting a giveaway. So I'm suggesting two giveaways on Vogel Street. One just before Hayden coming this way down, and one just before Featherston going this way up. So that when traffic want to turn right into Featherston Street, they can do that. They can do that easily. And if they're coming up going that way towards Hayden, they can turn right into Hayden easily. What I understand that you were talking about at the meeting 22 days ago is right-hand turn bays in the middle of the street. So the cars will move into the right-hand turn bays, and yet they won't be able to take a right turn. They have to wait for all the traffic to pass, and then they can turn. So I'm suggesting that this is a better idea. And also, so the only change is essentially is 2 giveaway signs in Vogel Street to allow the right turning traffic to move easily. And it has an advantage, like for example, a bicycle coming along from Hayden Street along towards Feverson Street. I saw a child that took 3 minutes before he could get across the street, but his problem is halved with this idea. He can indicate right, and when the traffic coming from Tremaine down stops, he can put his right hand out, or she can put her right hand out, and the traffic coming up can say, oh, bicycle turning right. We will stop for it, and he can get across. So there's an improvement there for a cyclist. So if you, what is the point of allowing a free flow of traffic going up and down Vogel Street and not letting the right turning traffic turn? Because one of the aims of this exercise is to reduce the speeds of vehicles in Vogel Street down to 50 kilometres an hour. So a give way is consistent with that idea. I'll just check some of these notes. Now last year, where did this idea come from? Well, originally when I was at the Rosalind Library, I was all in favour of, oh yeah, let's have some right-hand turn bays. But then afterwards, one of the people at the Rosalind Library drop-in session said, oh, I live just along here on Vogel Street, and if you do that, all of this traffic will move it to the side and stream past, and I can't get safely out of my driveway. So I thought, okay, well I'll see if I can think anything around that. So this is where this idea of 2 giveaway signs came up. And is there anything similar in Palmerston North already like this? Well, there is at Botanical and Gillespie's and Tremaine. There's a roundabout, but there's no room for a roundabout here. But it doesn't matter, the effect is the same. Everybody is giving way to the right, traffic coming on the right. There's another intersection I'm familiar with, a little bit like this. That's in, let's see, Burke Street, from Cooper Street going up Burke Street. You've got a free right turn into Walding Street, because you've got in this case, a stop sign. So traffic coming the other way from Burke Street has to stop. But here I'm just suggesting give ways. So there are examples like that elsewhere. Let's have a look. Actually, if you can see from this drawing, the road's actually 4 lanes at the moment. It's actually got 4 lanes on the lanes near the footpath. You can cars can park. And I would be proposing all the cars stay in the lines near the centre. So I personally think this is a better idea than what you're already seeming to be progressing with. So if you like this idea of a better flow for all the traffic, you perhaps could suggest to the, what do you call it, Transport and Development team, which they're really good to us, because they in the original submissions, it used to be just option 1 and option 2, but then they put a third option in. We could disagree with option 1 and disagree with option 2 and provide our own ideas. So that was really good of them to give us a chance to put alternatives in. So here we go. How much time have I got?
Just 1 minute.
Oh, yeah, does anybody want to comment anything? So this is the idea. I think that it's like a roundabout. It's better for everyone, and it doesn't involve cutting into berms, all this extra expense. You see, as you're aware, you wanted to get this done in year ending, 2025, but with this idea of turn bays, having to possibly buy land, move berms, could make the exercise go into the next financial year after that, which was a concern to Councillor Barrett, because I watched the video. So I think it's good all round, this idea. So if you want to perhaps talk to the manager, how come he hasn't progressed this idea and just stuck with the traditional right-hand turn bays? Is there a reason behind it, or is there some merit in this?
Thank you, Peter.
Yeah, thank you very much.
That
Thank you.
concludes, thanks for your submission, and that will be considered on the 29th and 30th of May. Okay?
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next submitter, I'd like to invite Eric Constantine, submission 690. Welcome, Eric.
Madam Chair, Mayor, Councillors, I shall be extremely brief. If any of you took the trouble to read my submission, you'll be well aware of my opposition to any spending that adds a single dollar to our present irresponsible debt. This consultation, in my view, is the most disreputable consultation process of the past 34 years. During the past 34 years, the majority of men and women elected to serve the people of Palmerston North have, regardless of political affiliations, with integrity, principles and ethics, refused to accept the corruption by capital value rating or its hybrid of the most principled of property rating ever devised, and that is land value rating. I would like to see those same principles, integrity and ethics resurface, and that Council reject any attempt to corrupt any further our present system of property rating, either by hybrid or any other form of capital value rating, or the manipulation of the variable rate to create irresponsible levels of debt. I have a neighbour, a single mother with a 4-year-old child, living on a minuscule section of some 310 square metres. She works part-time to provide for themselves and owns a own home. An article in the Man02 Standard illustrated the views of one submitter who, given the information provided and subsequently found, I concluded as a home on some 2,428 square metres, nearly 8 times the size of that of my neighbour. Members such as the above and those in Hokowhitu and Awapuni all have land areas, some who may be councillors, who support the corruption of the LV system, require my neighbour to subsidise not only their rates, but also their wealth, their lifestyle, their environment, their retirement and their advantages. Who among you considers that fair? I personally support land value rating because not only is it the most progressive tax system ever devised in and by New Zealand, and in addition recognised globally, but because it is based on principles, ethics and morality rather than politics of greed, selfishness and self-interest. I would hope the above table, and in particular my example, will convince councillors of this. I have found it regrettable that during the present term, all semblance of openness and transparency have been ignored and replaced by deception. Thank you.
Thank you, Eric. There doesn't seem to be a question from Councillor Wood.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Eric, for your submission. I just want to understand further what you mean when you say that this is a deceitful and deceptive means of introducing capital value rating and that not much information has been available. I believe all the reports that I've seen have been made available publicly, as well as this consultation document and process is publicly disclosed why we're considering it and the reasons for and against. I appreciate you don't support it, but I just want to understand what you find deceptive or deceitful about it. It all seems very open and transparent to me.
Capital value rating over the last 34 years has had one objective. That is to reduce the rates of wealthy properties, especially those on large sections, and place that burden onto the more vulnerable ratepayers. And I have a number who live in my area. That's the basis of capital value rating. Now, I did a number of charts. I find that the hybrid chart and the CV chart are in some way corrupted, and I don't believe they're accurate. There's something wrong with the information. And there was one instance in particular that caught my attention, and it related to that example I gave on the large section. I calculated that that section, using, I believe, the hybrid section, only had roughly a 1% increase in rates. That doesn't sound right. That's why I would question the calculations by council of both the hybrid and the capital value rating. Because in my view, they're chaotic. That's all I can say about them. Both of those are chaotic. The only simple one is a land value one.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Barrett.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Thanks, Eric, for your 77 pages of submissions. My question relates to page 1. On the bottom of page 1, there's a figure there, and I just wondered if you'd be willing to explain to us what has gone into that figure and what you're hoping to demonstrate with it.
This one?
Yes, thank you.
Well, the information in this chart actually gives every councillor the opportunity to question my values. Because this time, instead of just putting property number, I gave the addresses. So it allows a councillor, any councillor, to check up on my figures.
Yeah.
What is it you find odd about them?
Oh, it wasn't that I find anything odd about it. I was just wondering what's the point that you're trying to get across with that particular figure?
Chaotic. It's chaotic when you compare the capital value one there to the land value one.
Okay.
There's something wrong with their figures, and I can't put my finger on it. But to be quite honest, it wouldn't surprise me if after all these meetings and consultations, someone in the management came up with another idea, and then we don't get the chance to speak to it. That was the only thing I could come up with. Why they're so chaotic?
Thanks. That's helpful to understand what you were hoping to convey with that figure. Appreciate you coming in, Eric. Madam Chair.
Thank you, Eric. Just one question from me. And my question's on page 5 of your submission. The graph at the bottom of that page, the commentary there talks about rate reductions being applied to the higher value properties at the expense of the lower value ones.
Yep.
And debt. And you talk about increased debt has been a consequence of such reductions.
Correct.
I'm just wanting to understand the correlation between the size of the debt and the rates model that we might choose.
If you looked at the submission where I did Don't have it. I did a chart two charts in 2003, I think it was, and it illustrated the reduction in the variable rate that was applied to the high value properties, which reduced their rates in particular. By reducing their rates, contributed to the higher debt, the irresponsible debt we have at present. Because if they kept to a reasonable variable rate and not kept dropping it, we came within, if I remember, 3 years of a flat rate. Now, I appreciate it will never go to zero, but my point is, every time the variable rate drops, it places, it helps to create more debt because you're spending more but not collecting enough in. So you're borrowing more to collect what you fail to pick up from high value properties.
Thank you. Eric, I'm just wondering if you understand that we would collect exactly the same amount of income from rates, whether we have the land value or whether we have the capital value or whether we have the hybrid. Are you aware that the amount we would receive in rates would be exactly the same?
Sorry?
Are you aware that the income that council would receive from rates would be exactly the same, whether it was capital value or land value or hybrid options?
Well, if you reduce the rates on high value properties, who has to contribute the money to make up the difference? Low value properties.
Okay, thank you, Eric. That completes your time. Thank you for coming and making a submission today.
You're very welcome, and thank you very much
And your,
for your time.
Your submission will be considered at the end of May.
Thank you.
The next submission is John Collins from the Retirement Villages Association New Zealand, submission 1167. So John's not here? Okay, and is Paul Robertson here? Lovely. Welcome, Paul. Paul is submission 1169.
It's all working? Yep. Well, thank you for having me, everyone. Hello, and thank you, Madam Chair, Mayor and councillors. This is I've lived in Palmerston all my life. In all those years, the first time I ever stepped in a council building was yesterday. And so this is sort of a bit new to me in terms of doing a verbal submission. I've made one written submission once before, but this is my first verbal, and I'm not a great public speaker, but I don't know, I think I do okay sometimes. First thing I'd like to say is, when I'm talking to people about Palmerston North, people that come in from outside, wherever they might be from, overseas, around the country, whatever, I often say to people, Palmerston North is the best city in the world in which to live. And I say that because I sincerely mean it. But I don't see it staying that way. And that sort of saddens me a bit, but I'll move on from there and just talk more about what I actually do want to talk about for this. And firstly, I'd like to say that every house that I have lived in and owned as an adult, I have built. So I've never bought a house to live in. I've always built it. And that's 3 houses, so I sort of feel like I do that little bit, make a little bit of contribution towards the housing crisis in a way. And And my first house, I became a ratepayer in Palmerston North in 1983. So if you think I look younger than that, then I'm probably older than you think, but we won't go there. When I bought my first house, I was an apprentice on very low wages, and it was extremely tough. To raise the deposit, I had to make a lot of sacrifices. I had to cut back on spending. Instead of buying smoko pies in the morning on cold mornings at work, I made my lunches. A lot of people don't make their own lunches. I made my own lunches the night before. Did all sorts of things to help me save for the deposit of my house. And I raised the deposit and moved in, and then for a number of years it was really tough living, paying the mortgage as well. And it was only the box on a section in Kilburn Grove. There was no fences, no drive, no paths, no letterbox, no clothesline, nothing, just the house. So over a few years I did all that myself, and I'm a keen do-it-yourselfer in so many things, and that's just one of them that I've done over the years. Anyway, so also to make ends meet, I took on extra jobs. Besides my job as an apprentice, I did wine waiting jobs and things like that. Since then, I've had a divorce, and I've been a long time remarried, which is fine, but I had a divorce in the early days. My first wife was in with me in our first home, and they were very acrimonious proceedings, went on for 10 years, and that cost a lot of money and a lot of angst over 10 years. It wasn't just 6 months worth. I've also been made redundant twice in my life. Yet now, I own my own home, I have no mortgage, and I own other property. I've never been on a big income. It's always been reasonably modest too. So I've never been like a high-paid, like a lawyer or a dentist or a doctor or anything like that. So I've been able to achieve all that and have no debt eventually. I've had no debt for quite a few years now, just by putting in the effort, the work, thinking about how I manage my finances, making sacrifices. And I think to myself, well, if I can do that, why can't you guys do that? Like, there's a bunch of you, it's not just one brain working on this, there's a whole lot of brains here. You've got people in your finance and everything. Why can't they come up with something to save some costs, get the best value for money out of projects that we do, and reduce debt rather than increase debt? Because debt is a burden and it doesn't go away overnight. So yeah, I'd like to see the council focus primarily, or almost exclusively, on the core services that we need, which is obviously the water, the roads, and things like that. But I wouldn't want to do away with some of the things that anyone can use, which is the things like the library, which I use, and things like the events that we have in the square and the esplanade, that sort of thing. They're all great, and I go to quite a few of those. But there's a limit to how much we can spend on big costing projects like the community hub in Awapuni, things like that. So yeah, so I'll move on to the next point, which is social housing, mental health. I think that should be central government. Other councils around the country, from what I've been hearing, a lot of them have been moving away from providing social housing. Now, they might not have got rid of it completely, but I know about one that's been sold in Mount Maunganui, or was being sold in Mount Maunganui, council pensioner flats, for example. And I'm not against social housing, I'll make that quite clear, but I think the burden needs to be on the country rather than on individual councils to as much degree as possible. So I don't like seeing Palmerston City Council going down the social counselling path too much. And even, I know some projects might be a collaboration between central government or private enterprise like Soho Group and what have you, but it's got to be kept under control, in my view. Yeah, and I just wonder about, like, and I know a few people in social housing, so it's not like I'm out of touch with what goes on with some of this stuff. And, like, for example, I know some people, and their rent in social housing is about $100 a week, because it's based on their income if they're on pension or benefit, whatever. And they have no maintenance to pay and no insurance on the property, just they may have some insurance on assets, whatever, but not on the home. As a homeowner, with the increases we're talking about currently, with council and if I add Horizons rates and with that, and they're talking 21% in my case, up my way where I live. I've been checking quite a few houses just to see in case there was something unusual about my house, but all the houses I've checked out where I live, they're all around the 20 to 22% mark increase for this year. So you add that and add the rates that Palmerston North Council is proposing, my rates are going to be around about $5,000 a year. The people in social housing are paying about $5,000 a year. And I don't have to, they don't have to pay insurance, they don't have to pay maintenance, and I do. So, you know, I've put the effort in, I've slogged my guts out all my working life, I've made sacrifices, I've done a lot of things to get to where I've got to, and it hasn't been on high incomes. And here I am now, I'm having to take rates hikes to provide services to people who, for whatever reason, haven't been able to do that or haven't chosen not to do it. I do know some people that have worked all their working life and they've stayed in social housing. They could have purchased their own home, but they've opted not to. They felt that they just didn't need to. And the more social housing we have, the easier it makes for more people to get into social housing, in my opinion. Yeah, and I'm concerned about the talk of 106% rates increase in 10 years' time for Palmerston North Council as well. I'll move on quickly to the three options for the rates systems, land value, hybrid and CV, and currently land value. I haven't really looked at this very closely, but from what I can tell, and what you were just talking about before, Councillor Naylor, about the rates for the Palmerston North going to stay the same, the revenue. So some people are going to take a hike and some people are going to have to obviously get a reduction for it to balance out. In my own case, I want to see land value stay. And I'm not thinking about it from my own point of view, because I like to think about the wider picture here. And I don't think about just me, like a lot of people are talking about their personal interests, I find. The land value and the hybrid, whichever one it is, it makes very little difference to my rates, very little with the proposed increase. With CV, with CV capital value, it's slightly more, but again, in my case, it's not a huge amount, but it's a little bit more significant. So I think land value is best, and the reason why is because I think it helps discourage land banking. There are people that have quite large sections, currently pay quite high rates, and I think that should remain because we've got a housing shortage, we've got a land shortage. So by putting the
Paul,
keeping the rates high, it discourages land banking.
Paul, can I just get you to wrap up now? Thank you. Just your time's up.
Okay, well, I would have had more to say, but I thought I was going to get it through in 5 minutes, but it took me twice as long. Okay, thanhanks very much.
Well, thank you very much for your submission, and we'll be considering that on the 29th and 30th of May. Is Nigel Fitzpatrick here? Welcome, Nigel. Submission 1172.
Good evening, Pomaria. Thank you, and thank you for listening to me at the end of a long day. For me, sorry, not for you guys. Apologies again. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, perhaps I should have thought a bit more. So when I noticed that all councils throughout New Zealand are facing large rate rises, and that is things that are beyond the control of council. So I'd like to acknowledge that you are in a difficult situation. I'd also think that part of it is the growth, so it is a challenge of growth. But the problem with growth is, well, it brings challenges, and one of those is incremental changes. Climate change is an example of incremental change that will bring more storms and more pressure on council infrastructure. Another example is me cycling for the last 20 odd years in Palmerston. So cars have got bigger, trucks have got bigger, there are more cars, there are more trucks. Cycling is less pleasant now than it was 20 years ago when I started. And that's partly because of the success of Palmerston North. It's grown, there's more suburbs, the intersections are busier. It does mean that when you're a cyclist, you do get scary occasions. I do remember my daughter doing a left-hand turn. I was standing watching her and she took her hand off her right hand and waved at me. And there was a truck and trailer right next to her. Yeah, I'm a callous father, so I didn't say anything. She put her hands back on, no problem. My other daughter did actually have to fend herself off a truck at the top of West End intersection. Again, I'm a callous father, and told her, well, back on the horse. The truck driver, it was the first accident he had. I can go on about that for some time. But I guess what I'm saying is that cycling is felt by most people to be dangerous and they don't feel comfortable cycling. I also note, and in my submission, I mentioned the Climate Change Commission, which is saying we need to increase cycling and walking because we need to reduce our emissions, and that's partly because of the Paris Accord, and that will have impacts on us economically. Eventually, once the Europe and China start thinking that we should do more than we're doing. It's also a problem for Palmerston North because you've got to think, well, how do we adapt to the future when the government is kicking a can down the road for at least 3 years? And I understand that you have got rates pressures, and I can see our rates going up. So it is a pressure. What I'm thinking, my personal, is that to adapt, we've got to keep on building cycle lanes. I think you need to keep building them. If you're not going to build them, if you're going to stop in Featherston Street, you need to review the whole cycle master plan. Because the plan there is building an infrastructure so you can cycle from A to B. If you're not going to do it, it's too hard, well, you're a political body, you have to call it. If it's impractical, say you can't do it. If you can't do it, you also need to change your your resilient and climate change city goal, because you're not going to meet that goal either. There's no way you can reduce emissions without addressing transport. And you'll also need to think about how you have a safe travel within your plans. So I'm very keen for you to promote Featherston Street. I note that other speakers have been both for and against it, but I'm for it. And I think that you've got the strategy there. You need to put it into place because hopefully, well, at some stage, New Zealand's going to have to adapt. And we can kick the can down the road, but someday the bigger countries like Europe and China, who are still building coal mines, will say to New Zealand, pull the socks up. And because we're small and have to have trade with them, we won't have to do that. I think the other thing that you could also look at is regulating trucks. We're paying, as a ratepayer, I'm subsidising trucks. The big truck and trailer, you double the size of the weight, you quadruple the pressure on the roads. So I think there are regulations you can use, and you can put them mainly on the state highway so that the pressure is more on the taxpayer than the ratepayer. And it also means that for some schools, it'll be easier for the kids to travel to school, and there's less pressure on the parents driving them and dropping them off. So I'm keen for that. I think the last thing I'm wondering about is working with willing schools, just to create small little islands where the parents are more confident that the kid can get to school safely without having to drive or drop them off. So those are my 3 points. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Doesn't appear to be any questions, so thank you, Nigel, for your submission. And the final submission for the session is Cameron Jenkins from the Manawatu Tenants Union, submission 1221. Welcome.
Welcome. Thank you. Yes, here today for my 10 minutes to talk about housing in one of my many hats. But basically, you've got our submission. So really we just wanted to hammer the point around and remind people that our tenants are ratepayers as well. So any decision that has around the increase in rates directly affects tenants. Landlords put the rent up. We're seeing rents go up now in anticipation of rates increases because landlords want to get ahead of the game because they can only put the rents up once a year. So I really want to remind councillors that when a tenant has less money because the money is going to the landlord, who often lives out of town, that is money that is not being spent here in our city. It is not being spent in the cafes and in the small businesses that keep our city going. So just bear that in mind around the decisions. I am absolutely in for increasing spending on our community sector and our social housing, because I think that's what's needed, and we are better as in terms of housing space to spend the money in social housing than have to try and clean up the mess if we don't spend it, because that will cost us more money just in the sheer fact of when you look at what the costs are of what it is, of what a homeless person does cost the city. It's huge compared to what we can put into stopping them from becoming homeless to start with. So I would really like to use the time more for questions, because I think this is a really good time for the team to ask me questions around housing, but I am also would like to make sure that I support the Te Pūhara Hiki submission for doubling our community sector funding, and I just wanted to make it very clear in the email that I sent you all very late last night after yesterday's deliberation of why we have such frustration in the community sector around how this council calculates inflation and CPI. We had a submission yesterday about the average person not engaging with council. The average person in this city looks at increased costs based on CPI, not the market labour force index and all that sort of stuff. So when we talk about real time, inflation was 7% and we got 4% funding increase. That's the problem. So the email was really to submit that to support those questions that were being asked yesterday around funding. But it's open to questions.
Thanks, Cameron. First question from Councillor Dennison.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Cam, thank you. Just in regards to the rate increases, laying on the rental increases, just wanted to also say, would you appreciate that interest rates have also jumped in the last year, and insurance rates that are also impacting on rent, that it's not just solely a rates issue?
Yep, but when rates were 3%, I was still seeing $80 a week rent increases. So there's no link. When the interest rates go down and were low, rents weren't being decreased. So I don't see any causal link there between rates going up and realistically who benefits from the landlord relationship here. You know, if a tenant can't pay their rent, they're homeless and they're living in a car. If a landlord can't pay their mortgage, they sell the house and keep the capital gains. That's what we need to remember. For the tenant, there is no other option. And when we increase rates, the rates for me might go up as a homeowner, might go up $5 a week. But when the landlord puts my rent up by $50 a week, based on a $5 a week increase, how is that fair?
Yep. Okay. And just on the second question, the council's exploring the possibility of putting the council housing into a trust or a CCO, which would possibly get an income-related rent through government to help offset that and possibly grow this housing stock. Do you have any thoughts on that proposal?
I wouldn't support it in principle. I mean, I've just looked at the debacle and that Wellington have had. Wellington City Council have just finished or done that process, and it was a lot of hard work and there was a lot of challenges that they'd faced. And I think that there is a lot to unpack in that situation. That's probably not, that would allow me time here in this space, but I would be happily to have a conversation with you offline about that, because in doing it, we have to protect all the tenants, and I think moving it to that sort of a model would work, only on the proviso that it was for future housing and future development, not current stock. Is my view on that, but I'm happy to. I would flag that. Happily have a conversation with you offline about that.
Happy with that too. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Councillor Johnson.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Thanks, Cameron. I'm interested what issues are coming through your door at the moment from tenants. What are the main concerns of tenants at the moment who are coming to seek your support?
It's a lot of it's affordability. When 83% of our tenants can't afford to pay the rent, what they're doing is we're forcing them to go to state housing or council housing because it is the cheapest option. But that doesn't necessarily solve the problem. And at the moment, when we are seeing that people are more inclined to go for unhealthy homes, unfit homes, because they simply need a home. Because, like I said, it's the bridge. We only have one. You only built us one bridge to live under. So if you're not living under the bridge or in your car, where else are you going to live? So people are now picking unhealthy homes to live in because that is all that's available.
So a landlord's not obligated now to meet the healthy home standard?
Well, they should have been. But as we know, the central government extended the regulations on the hope that that would provide more compliance, but it hasn't provided any more compliance. So landlords now have till 2025 to make sure that all their homes are meeting healthy home standards. So that's another year that people are living in grotty, mouldy, damp housing. And that for every day, as Chairwoman will be able to confirm, every day that someone is in hospital because of poor housing costs taxpayers a lot of money on the other end. Yeah, $1,000 a day to stay in hospital.
Okay, I have got other questions, but I'll let other elected members go.
Sorry, I didn't mean to.
Thank you. Councillor Bowen.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thanks, Cameron, for your really thorough submission. I just wanted to go back to this point about council social housing and maybe a future trust, and you've been really clear in your submission that you don't support that, so thank you. You commented at the end of it about fixed pensioners' incomes that council housing has traditionally served. So obviously council's social housing has been for pensioners and people on a disability allowance. And if we were to move to the kind of trust model that has been discussed, we'd have to widen the scope of who we would take into our social housing. I wondered if you had a view on that.
Yes, you would have to then take anyone off the social housing register, which could be for any number of reasons why they're on there. There is a whole assessment process that tenants go through for that, but again, that's all independently done by the Ministry of Social Development, so people don't really get a lot of say in where they are ranked within that list. And then you would basically have to take them from the top of that list. So someone who might then be needing a house where currently the council would have that flexibility to go, oh, we really think you need a house and you could benefit from a council provided housing, you wouldn't get that say.
And what impact do you think it would have on our council house communities, which at the moment are quite, they're focused on elderly people, disabled people? That would change a lot.
Yes,
What do you think the
and I
impact
think
of that would be?
we would see a lot more possibly vulnerable tenants in situations that aren't suitable for them, because you would have a lot more, you could potentially run into a lot more disputes within tenants and neighbours and people not being able to fit together, whereas currently the housing team have a lot of say in terms of making sure that they get the right people fitting together in our council properties, whereas I think if we go the other way, we might lose a lot of that say.
Okay, thank you, Cameron. Always useful.
Councillor Barrett. Okay, that concludes questions. Thank you, Cameron. And your submission will be considered 29th and 30th of May.
Awesome, thank you.
So we will be having a break now and coming back at 6 o'clock.